right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is published in the local papers, and also we are being broadcast live on Channel 34, and we are being streamed live on YouTube. Notice was also posted on the township website and posted also in the lobby of this building. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and it means that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and that we're obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that the board can legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing should be maintained at all times. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally is excused. Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Ortiz is excused. Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Mr. Terry is excused. I should say Counselor Terry. Ms. Willis.
Here.
Chair Wynn.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
And Mr. Neiman.
Here.
Okay.
Next, we have our minutes from the December 4th meeting.
I received changes to the minutes from Vice Chair Brodock and Ms. Lockman, with the exception that we need to keep in the minutes that the planning board did come out of executive session.
We're not still there.
Are there any other changes to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Is there all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Yes.
Okay. And that takes us to our first application this evening for 509 Park Street LLC.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, whenever you're ready.
Yes, proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Michael Piramali, law firm Gascio and Pamaco, now located at 1 Boland Drive, Suite 102 in West Orange. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant 509 Park Street LLC in connection with a subdivision and development of 509 Park Street in Montclair. By way of a brief summary for any members of the board or the public who were not at the prior meetings of the Historic Preservation Commission or the Planning Board, I will keep this brief. The applicant has been before the Montclair Historic Preservation Committee first on May 11th and then again on September 14th, 2023, requesting permission to demolish an existing detached garage at the property and seeking a favorable recommendation for a subdivision of the existing lot into 3 lots. At the May 11th meeting, the commission denied the demolition permit application and also requested clarification with regard to any historic structures which may or may not exist at the site to be protected, which would be impacted by the subdivision and the development proposed. We returned to the Historic Preservation Commission at the September 14th meeting with revised plans which preserve the historic elements of the property, but despite our best efforts, the HPC recommended that the subdivision be denied. The applicant then appeared before this board at its November 6, 2023 meeting, requesting preliminary and final major subdivision approval, along with 3 bulk variances, again for the proposed 3-lot subdivision. Having heard the comments of the board and the public at the last meeting, decision was made to adjourn the application and revise the development proposal to address as many of the comments and concerns raised by the board and the public as possible. Since the November 6th meeting date, the applicant has revised the subdivision plan to eliminate the proposed lot to the north and subdivide into 2 lots as opposed to 3. The applicant further revised the design of the proposed dwellings to more closely align with the historic character of the existing dwelling that is slated to remain and be repaired, and also the surrounding area. In revising the plans as discussed, the applicant has further reduced the variance relief required in connection with this application to 2 bulk variances. Specifically, the application now proposes 2 variances. First, bulk variance at issue is for proposed lot depth for lot 2901, which is a pre-existing condition, but which will be slightly worsened from a depth of 210.9 feet to 205.06 feet, where 212.84 feet is required. The second bulk variance at issue is for a front yard setback to the existing single-family dwelling at the property. The current condition is 47 feet, will not be changed, 52 feet is required. So tonight, we intend to present a revised subdivision plan and architectural design to the board in the hopes that we have addressed most of the concerns raised at the last meeting. Tonight, again, I have only one witness to present. Here with us tonight is Michael Pietry of Pietry Engineering, has prepared the proposed subdivision plan, the engineering plans, and the architectural plans in support of this application. I also have my client, Nathan Rozen, who's the principal of the applicant and property owning entity 509 Park Street LLC here as well. If the board or the public has any questions of him. So with that, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to call my first witness again, Mr. Michael Pietry.
Mr. Pietry, recognize you remain under oath, yes?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have qualified Mr. Pietry as an expert witness in the fields of architecture, engineering, and planning at the last meeting. I'm happy to do it again if you so choose.
Remains in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pietry, would you describe the revisions that we made to the plans to try to make this a better presentation and a better development proposal for
Certainly.
this board?
The first thing that we did, because we were dealing with lot depths, normally when we do lot depths, we use the tax map information. It's relatively basic and it's fairly straightforward, but the tax maps are not necessarily accurate documents. So what we did is we ordered the deeds for all of the properties along Park Street between Overlook Road and Buckingham Road to the north. So basically starting at Buckingham and coming down to Overlook, Overlook, Buckingham, we incorporated all of those lots in our analysis. I actually prepared a summary chart if anybody would like to see it. I have copies for the board. And basically what I did.
Mr. Pietry, is this on the materials that you've provided, or we need to mark it?
It is not, it should be.
Okay. Mr. Neese, we're A1 with today's date, or where are we?
I think we're up to A9. I think what I'd like to do is mark the revised plans dated December 7th as A10. And then this can be.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Pietry, would you describe what we're looking at for the record?
Yeah, so what we're looking at is a plotting of the deeds of all of the property from Overlook Road to Buckingham Road. And what we've done on this sheet is, by definition, we've established the fact that the Overlook Road lot has its frontage on Overlook, not on Park, and its lot depth is measured perpendicular, or is measured from the center of the line on Overlook to the center of the line perpendicular to Park, so that lot doesn't impact the lot depth analysis at all. The lot on the corner of...
I'm sorry, is that lot 24 you're talking about, looking at your exhibit?
That is lot 1, looking at the exhibit.
Oh, okay.
So the other lots along that stretch of street, including the corner lot on the other end, we've established the lot depths of all of those lots. And we've established not only the lot depths, but we've established the requirements for each of them based upon your ordinance. So what you'll see in the diagram is that existing lots 24, 29, 30, and 31, which are primarily the lots on the northern side, with the exception of the corner lot, are the lots that are non-conforming with your ordinance for lot depth. So there are a total of 8 lots, and 4 of those lots, including the subject property, are not in conformance with your lot depth requirement. It's simple to see why. As I said last month, the lines are not parallel to one another. The right-of-way line of Park Street and the rear line of these established lots are not parallel with one another. So it's simple to see why the rear lot, since the rear lot is not parallel, how these lot depths vary and are impacted by the lot depths to the north. The lot depth for the property in question is 212.82, which is the average of lots 31, 30, 28, and 27. And I know that number is slightly different than what I gave you last month, which is why I wanted to clarify it. In terms of plan changes, so the most obvious change is the fact that we have eliminated the proposed lots to the left of the existing house. So while we had 3 lots before, we had 3 lots before with a lot created down here, we now only have 2 lots. The southerly lot, which is 2902, and the northerly lot, which is 2901, and contains the existing building. We've created a lot that has 100 feet of frontage on Park Street, and we have set the new line perpendicular to Park Street so that it better reflects the orientation of the existing house, which is generally parallel to Park. So this line was set perpendicular to Park, whereas before we had it paralleling the southerly line. This configuration lends itself to respecting the existing home. The new lot exceeds the 80-foot lot frontage requirement by 25%. It creates a lot that's 18,902 square feet. The proposed lot line also respects the existing home, and the requirement in the zone is a minimum 6-foot side yard, but at its closest point, we have 14.6 feet. All the coverages remain with the ordinance requirements, and our conceptual design for lot 2902 incorporates a different style home. I'll be glad to show you the architectural elements, but we have also shifted the garage to the rear of the property, which is, I think, another suggestion that the board made. So it is a detached garage behind the proposed home, and the driveway comes down the southerly side of the property. So we made the change to the garage despite the fact that we found that a number of the homes along that area had front-facing garages, and that the garage for the existing home has a tendency to face towards the street.
Mr. Pietry?
Yes.
Do you want to use the handheld mic?
Sure.
If you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Okay. We also prepared new plans for the house, and we put this in the streetscape. So when you're looking at, doesn't feel like it's on. The existing house on the lot sits here. Our new house sits here. And the 2 houses to the south sit here. The 2 houses to the north sit here. So where we had an issue before with crowding the house immediately to our left, we don't have that issue anymore because we've eliminated that lot. So the existing house has plenty of space between it. The new home is appropriately sized and has plenty of space between it and the home next to it. I'm not going to go through floor plans, but I know that the board asked to see elevations last time, and I'll stop with this one. So the bottom elevation is the front elevation that faces the street. We kept a similar roof style to what you see regularly up and down Park. And on the top, what you see is the right side of the house as you come around the back of the house to the 2-car freestanding garage that is behind it. I'll note that the buildings as proposed all meet the setback requirements. The garage meets the setback requirements. Both buildings meet the height and stories requirement per your ordinance. So based upon what we have submitted to this board, we've reduced the number of requested variances, I'm not talking about the existing conditions, from 3 down to 1. And we still have 2 non-conforming conditions, the existing setback of the principal structure on the site, which is closer to the right-of-way than it's allowed to be, and the existing walls in the rear of that building, which are 7.5 feet and are only permitted to be 7. Neither one of those conditions is affected by the subdivision, so the variance that we are creating is the fact that we are taking the existing lot, which does not comply with the lot depth requirement, and we're making that slightly worse. How worse is it? The lot depth requirement is 212.82. 210.9 is existing, and 205.6 is proposed. If anybody takes the time to look at the math on what I handed out, you'll see that the differential on our lot is about 7.21 feet. So we're 7.21 feet short of the requirement in the proposed condition. Lot 24 is 76.69 feet short of its requirement. Lot 30 is 23.61 feet short of its requirement. And Lot 31 is 34.76 feet short of its requirement. So our deviation is the smallest among all of the non-conforming lots within this section of the street. While I point out the existing block has 4 non-conforming lots and 4 conforming lots, in the proposed condition there would be 5 conforming lots and 4 non-conforming lots. As such, the application brings the block more into conformance with the ordinance from a percentage basis. I'll further offer that the previous proofs provided, both for the positive and negative criteria, continue to apply, and with less nonconformity in the proposed plan, clearly pose a lesser impact on both the zone plan and zoning ordinance. Bottom line, if the board were to deny this application, there would be 4 nonconforming lot depths within this block, and if they approve the application, there will still be 4 nonconforming lot depths within this block. Our proposed lot, as I indicated earlier, complies with all of the standards, in fact exceeds the standards set forth in your zoning ordinance, because we did provide more lot width to have more respect for the development pattern on the street, and I think we established and created that.
Thank you, Mr. Pietry. Just appreciate you going over the revisions to the plans and the changes that were made, but just specifically with regard to some of the comments that were made at the board meeting last time, if we could just go over those. Specifically, with regard to the preservation of the front fieldstone wall and the breaks in the wall that are necessary for the driveway, we also discussed a possible walkway. How was that addressed in your revised plans?
So the existing wall carries across the subject property and the property to the south of us. And our opening will be the smallest of the openings in the wall, because we're putting in a 12-foot wide driveway. So we have a 12-foot wide section of wall that we're removing. The existing opening is wider than that, and the existing opening for the house also has a walkway. So we've committed to not have a separate opening in the wall for a walkway to preserve as much of the walls as possible.
But if the board did prefer a walkway, we were able to add that. It just would result in a little bit more of a break in that wall.
About 4 feet, yes.
And obviously, we did eliminate the opening in the wall that was proposed for the northerly lot by eliminating that lot, correct?
That is correct.
So we also heard concerns about the number of trees which will likely be removed. Did we do some work to try to identify the trees that would be removed and the number of trees that would be removed if we went with this proposed conceptual development?
We actually did that, and it's shown on the conceptual grading plot plans. We show the trees to be removed X'd out. There are a total of 21 trees that would be removed to build this house, driveway, and storm sewer system.
And again, that's estimated at this point, but you
Yes.
anticipate that that's roughly the amount of trees that we would need to remove.
Yes,
And obviously, the applicant would comply with the tree removal ordinance fully and try to plant as many trees, replacement trees on the property.
yes.
I'm sorry, how many trees did you say?
21 is what's shown on our plan.
And how many would be removed?
I'm sorry,
21.
21 is what would be removed.
Ah, that's what I thought.
Mr. Pietry, with regard to stormwater improvements, that'll be part of this approval. I understand that you testified at the last meeting regarding stormwater improvements, but obviously it was a big rain last night, and everybody's rightfully concerned about stormwater. Your testimony last time was that this will be addressed at the building permit phase. Would you just go over the proposed stormwater design, what you'd anticipate having to design, and how that process would take place?
Certainly. And I'm going to refer to the screen and the conceptual grading plot plan that's on the screen now. We did a design that incorporated a subsurface recharge system behind the home. Now, that system is a series of underground pipes. They're set in stone, and provided we get at least 1 inch of perk per hour, that system will function properly. If we were not to get an inch per hour, we would have to change it to a detention system, basically hold the water back, release it at the same rate it was before. So that's something that would be done when we got to the construction phase. We don't do those this early.
But in any case, the situation would be better than it is now, no matter whether you use either system that you propose, depending on the perk rates.
That is correct.
Just a question about that. So the catch basin, are we calling it? What do you
It's
call it?
actually a detention system or retention system.
Okay, is that on a slope?
Yes, but the pipes are underground, they're level.
So it doesn't matter that it's on a slope?
Nope,
And what will it look like on the surface?
it'll look like grass.
Just grass on top, and how far down, how deep is the grass?
Well, topsoil is a minimum of 6 inches. The systems usually have a minimum cover of 18 inches. On a slope, the upgradient, I'm going to use my arms. So the systems are built level on the bottom,
Right.
and the slope's like this. So might be 18 inches down here. It could be 5 or 6 feet up here. So it's going to vary, but that's how we've built them and have probably done, I don't know, maybe 100 of them in Montclair.
And there would be no runoff to any neighbor's property?
The only runoff is what goes there today is allowed to go there in the future. So, yes,
So there will be runoff to the neighbor's
Absolutely.
property?
the water runs downhill no matter what we do.
But you don't redirect it if you have a new building there?
No,
Away from the neighbor's
what we do
property.
is we collect it
Yeah,
and we discharge it. In this instance, we have this system that holds it underground, hopefully perks it into the ground, and that system discharges to what's called a scour hole, and the scour hole eliminates velocity and creates sheet flow. That's one of the things that the Soil Conservation District reviews, and to ensure that there's not erosion on the side of the hill. I mean, your municipal engineers review it as well, but this is common practice.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further direct questions of Mr. Pietry, so I turn him over to the board at this point.
Members of the board, question?
I had a quick question about the wall. The sections that are being cut out to allow for a driveway and/or a walkway, is it possible to preserve them and just parallel them to those various entryways to maintain the integrity of the wall, just perhaps putting it in a slightly different context?
This is a rubble stone wall. So is it possible to take portions of that wall and turn it into the driveway at the top? Yes, as long as it doesn't preclude sight distance, that can be done. Yes. So it might have to step down, but it can be done.
Thank you.
Mr. Pietry, I have a question. One of my comments was to relocate the driveway to the north side of the house, where there would be fewer trees lost.
And I agree with your comment wholeheartedly. Actually, the best place to put it is probably in the middle of the lot, because that's where there are very few trees. But if I put it on the right, or if I put it in the middle, I'm going to disturb that garden. And the Historic Preservation Commission doesn't want us to disturb the garden. So we can preserve trees, but we'd have to disturb the garden.
Mr. Pietry, on your survey layout and demolition plan, you've got a number of items shown in red as to be demolished. Can you describe what's going to be demolished?
There's some existing walls that are within the property that have not been deemed to be part of the historic area. But let me turn to that sheet in the set.
Those were reviewed by Connolly and Hickey, the HPC consultants.
Oh, the last page?
Yes, the last set. Yeah, last page.
Okay, so the last page is the sheet that shows what was deemed, the structures that were deemed historic on the site outside of the existing home. So when you're looking at what is in green, it is the garden that we talked about in the front of lot 2902, and the garage that's located in the northeasterly corner of 2901, both of which are to remain. So there are some red areas, which include a portion of the wall along the front shown to be removed, a portion of a wall halfway back on lot 2902, and stairs and a little wall at the, I'll say, the rear of the pool area in the existing condition. Those areas that are to be removed, with the exception of the wall along the frontage, none of them were deemed historic.
And they were reviewed by the HPC's consultant.
Yes, the HPC's consultant actually marked what is shown on here in green. So
I do have copies of that marked up survey prepared by the HPC's consulting architect. If anybody wants a copy, I do have those.
Yes, please.
Absolutely. I'll hand them out.
as well.
Would you like to mark it?
I think we ought to.
Okay.
That'll be A12.
Yeah,
Got to locate it, but I'll find it. I have it.
Just a question, has anything on the site been demolished thus far? Anything at all, or trees cut down?
I'm not aware of any, but I can't say for sure.
Mike, I think they marked up ours.
Okay.
This is what they provided. They marked up ours.
Okay.
How many trees are existing? You said 21 would be removed. Out of how many?
I don't have that number. There are a lot of trees on this site.
Thank you.
Basically, where we're setting the house on the site, it's relatively open. If you look at our grading plot plan, we're locating the house immediately behind the existing garden. And that area is relatively open now. There's very few trees there. So the trees that are being removed are primarily along the side of the driveway, which I think is why the planner made her comment to relocate it to the other side. There are less trees on the other side, but we don't have room to do the driveway in accordance with Montclair's grading ordinance, because you have stipulations in the first 20 feet of the lot has to be at a certain grade, so we have to fill it up, and then we have to be able to grade that out to the sides, and we'd not be able to do that with the garden wall there.
So the trees are the trees that you see from Park Street that are closest to a pedestrian walking around that you'd be removing? Just-
There are, if you look at the, sorry, I made it blue. I'm not making it blue. Maybe I do that. Okay. So there are a number of trees in the front of this lot that are being retained, like in the front of this development lot. As a rough count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So in this area right here, there are 15 trees that can be retained. Where we're taking down trees is where we have to grade the driveway.
How about in the back where you have your detention basin?
Again, there's not a lot of trees within the area of the detention basin or within the area of the house. The trees that are Xed out and are shown on your plans, they're Xed along here.
I think you turned the microphone off, it's not picking up.
Okay, better? Okay. So the trees that are being removed are along the driveway side here. There are no trees within the footprint of the house being removed. There's no trees within the footprint of the garage being removed. There's no trees within the detention system being removed. And we aligned the discharge, the overflow pipe from the detention system to be in an area where there are no trees. So basically, the tree removal is associated with the driveway.
Do I understand that this property has been designated some kind of nature preserve or for birds flying around or something?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of that?
It is.
It is? Yeah, I thought so. Well, maybe we can hear exactly what it is. Can we ask somebody from the audience, or
When we
wait?
get to that.
Yeah, okay.
We have further questions from the board? Are there questions from the audience with respect to the testimony this evening of this witness?
I've got one.
Nope.
You want to come up?
Yes, please.
I'm a little late to this game. I live 5 doors down from the project.
You give us your name and your
My
address.
name's Margot Walter.
You may have to push the button so the light turns on.
Okay.
Perfect.
My name's Margot Walter. I live at 543 Park Street, which is at Park and Alexander. So I'm 5 houses down. And I just had a question about property tax.
Well,
Take-
this is the time to ask questions of this witness about what this witness testified to this evening.
I'm new to my civic involvement, so I will go down back and then I'll ask that question later.
Okay. Yeah, if there's any other questions of this witness, please come up.
Good evening. My name is Tyler Zaburl. I'm an attorney with Spiro, Harrison, and Nelson, and I represent one of the objectors, Brett Stratton. He lives at 500 Park Street, just across from the proposed subdivision. Mr. Pietry, I just had a couple
Can you
of-
spell your last name?
Sure, it's Z like zebra, E like Edward, B like boy, E like Edward, R like Ralph, L like Larry.
First name?
Tyler?
Can you bring the mic closer to you?
Sure.
Thank you. And who you representing again?
Brett Stratton. Okay. I just had a few questions. Why was the choice made to detach the garage from the home?
Well, one of the comments was that the area was primarily detached garages, so we did that. Another reason is because if I attach the garage in the location, we would have height issues.
And that would trigger a height variance for it to be attached?
If it were attached in its current location, it would trigger a different height, a different average grade, therefore a height variance, unless we modified the building.
Now, we had spoken a little bit about if you were to put the driveway to the right, to the north, rather. So if the lot were to be slightly wider, would you still have to disturb the garden?
The answer is no, it wouldn't have to be wider, but I don't know that I would do that to the existing house. I think the existing house is too big a home to be located 6 feet from a property line. And I only have, at its closest point, I said it was 14.6. So there's not a lot of space to do that.
And I guess I just have one question. Were the board to grant the subdivision application, would you agree to a condition of approval of no further subdivision?
That's not my decision,
Or with the applicant, rather?
not my decision.
All right. have
Well, I
nothing.
was going to ask the same thing. Can we, if we were to grant this, can we, part of a condition, we can't say that this cannot be, or subdivided and sold off, for example, to the house on the other side? We can't do that, no. All right.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up.
You don't have to raise your hand, by
Oh,
the way.
sorry.
No, just for anyone else. Once one person is done, if there's someone else who wants to ask a question, just please come forward.
But there will be a blue book. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Emma Jane Coombs. I live on Lorraine Avenue, fairly close by. It was just a question that occurred to me whilst you were talking tonight. I know that you're removing 21 trees, a lot of them down the side of the property where the driveway's going to be. I've just got a question around stormwater runoff, because obviously if you're putting in a large amount of hardscaping because of the driveway, you're removing the trees, you'll remove the berm of the old heritage tree roots as well. So where's the water going, which is going to sit on the driveway when you've taken down all the trees, the roots, and the berm that would normally take that water down?
It's a great question. So as I indicated in my testimony, and I'll see if I can do this from here, around you, the driveway comes down, there's an inlet, so there's a storm drain in the corner of the driveway, so it picks up the stormwater runoff from the driveway. All of the roof leaders from the house and from the garage are all directed into a subsurface system here, which will allow the water to recharge into the ground, provided that we have at least 1 inch per hour. DEP, the state has set regulations on all of these things. Your board engineer and your town engineer are aware of them, and so when this is ultimately designed, it has to be designed to meet those regulations. So it has to be at least 2 feet above groundwater, it has to be at least 2 feet above bedrock, and you have to have at least 1 inch of perk per hour. And that's kind of how we size this, because if you get 1 inch of perk per hour, you have to cut it in half by state regulations, it's half an inch per hour. And that's the least amount that you're allowed to do and still have recharge. So we've set this up in a worst case scenario. So we think it only gets better if perk is better, and go from there.
So the driveway's graded
It's graded
from the road, it's
from the
graded downhill all the way so
Yes.
that all the water.
Yes. The first 20 feet of the driveway has a slope that's restricted by ordinance, and it's 20 feet from the property line, not from the curb line. And from there, the driveway gets somewhat steeper. So there are some walls, there are some more grading disturbance here because of that, the need to fill this area in here to meet that the maximum slope requirement within 20 feet of the street. But that's all been accommodated for in this, which is, I'll remind you, it's a conceptual plan. It's not a final plan for construction permits.
And again, excuse me if I don't, this is the right time to ask this question, but when I was here last
What is your
time-
name?
Oh, Evan Cutler. I'm a neighbor. When I was here last time, there were several questions regarding the White House that's there now, and that you were asked whether there was any intention of passively demolishing the house or making it, I don't even know what the right word is,
Demolition by neglect.
demolition by neglect. Now, as a neighbor, I've seen, and you said that there was no intention whatsoever of doing that. Since that meeting, I've seen windows left wide open, completely wide open on days before giant storms. And to me, I'm a TV producer. I know nothing about architecture. I know nothing about but I do know that if you keep windows wide open before a big storm, to me, that looks like someone who's intentionally trying to destroy a house. So I guess my question is, is there a reason why that's continuing?
I can't answer that question. I can tell you that there are open permits and there's work being done on the house.
Okay. I mean, to me, I yell at my kids when the window's left open this much and it's gonna rain. To me, to have the giant windows in front of the house, like all of them left wide open before a day where it rains the entire next day, to me, just as an outsider, seems like intentional neglect.
Janice, is there any monitoring of that? Does the township building department or anybody monitor
No,
that behavior?
no.
I know neighbors called and supposedly someone came the next day because they were like kind of concerned because it did seem like a textbook case of like neglect, demolition by neglect. So I guess maybe other neighbors would know more. I was away the next day during that rain, but it was definitely a concern with a lot of people.
Mr. Piramali, might your client know about this?
Mr. Neese, yes, we do know about this, and I'm happy to call him to discuss the work that's been done with the property. But the testimony is pretty simple, and what it'll reveal is that if anyone has left the windows open or the doors open, it's the contractors that are working there. There's no intent to demolish. There's no intent to hurt the structure. My client is, for all intents and purposes, trying to repair the structure. He's taking out the appropriate building permits. The town is coming to inspect. It's going through its normal progress of construction there. So I don't know where this is coming from, frankly. I'm happy to call my applicant to testify to it, but I don't see how it'll solve the problem because it's just going to be he said, she said.
Well, what I'm hearing is that there is something of a problem, so.
I'm happy to call my applicant. Let's get through our
It's up to
engineer,
you.
and we're happy to do it. But
It's
I
your
just,
application,
to some degree, I believe it might be irrelevant to the context of this application, but that's another.
I'm just going
that's
on
another story.
the last meeting where you guys said that you weren't doing that, and then I have pictures on my phone with all the windows wide open and like the sky's black and about to.
I'm happy to call my client to address the concerns, but I don't think it's going to get us far.
It's your application.
I appreciate it.
I would like to question your client about something else.
I'm happy to call him
Yeah, thank you.
and have him available for your questions.
And then, should I mention about the trees now? I know that was asked when it is a National Wildlife Federation certified wildlife habitat. I'm the vice president of the Montclair Bird Club. I'm speaking, though, not as the vice president, who, by the way, is a heartbeat away from the presidency. But I'm talking purely as a amateur ornithologist who's been birding since the age of 7. And I live just down the street, and I walk my dog by there twice a day, and it is a spectacular set of trees that you're going to destroy. Almost all of them are oaks, over 150 years old, and as far as trees go, there's nothing better to attract wildlife. There's something between 450 and 500 different kinds of caterpillars that the oaks play host to, and come spring migration, that is a magnet. That spot right there is a magnet for migratory birds. And there are also, I can name at least 4 or 5 birds that are threatened that use that habitat to nest, including a pair of screech owls.
Mr. Cutler, could you repeat that designation, please?
Being vice president of the Montclair Bird Club?
No, the national, whatever it is.
But
national-
congratulations.
You're saying,
It is, believe me.
Heartbeat away from the presidency.
It was,
He's just looking for a pitch, you know?
it was
Mr. Coons, you said it was
National
designated
Wildlife Federation certified habitat.
by, okay, and was this something a previous property owner?
There's plaques still there now.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's been, I mean, I've only lived in Montclair for 20 years, but for the 20 years I've lived here, this is like, and when you're like walking your dog or walking your kids or whatever, you learn the spots that are like the terrific spots where the birds are and where the nature is, and that's like one of the best there is in all of Upper Montclair. Thank you.
Shannon Swinsky, 533 Park Street. And I had 2 questions. First, we haven't, just for the record, talked about the pitch, front to back again, to the point of the water runoff. Can you tell us the pitch in this subdivision proposal, front to back?
Yes.
And how that differs from what you had been looking at on the north side, front to back?
The south side has a low elevation of 309, and it has a high elevation of 333. So we're a differential of 24 feet. On the south side, and I don't have the lot line in front of me, but it's about here, a high of 329 and a low of 306.
So slightly
About the same.
more grade,
About the same.
but about the same. And then secondly, you were referring to my house as the one that fronts on Overlook, not on Park. I'm the corner of Park and Overlook, so I am, if you want to pull that other map back up. So you were referring to your calculations using this distance?
Yes.
As opposed to this far greater distance?
That is correct.
Since this is the frontage that we've all been looking at and the.
You have to talk into the mic so the people can hear you. Yeah.
So you use this for your calculation. We've been very concerned with the profile as it faces Park Street. If you use this in your calculation, how do those numbers change?
Well, the answer is you wouldn't use that because Montclair's ordinance defines corner lots as having the shorter frontage being considered the front, and the depth is perpendicular to that line, and that is the shorter frontage.
But for the concern of the neighborhood, the aesthetics, the, everything that we are looking at from a proposed change to the neighborhood, how that stretch of Park Street looks, and perhaps in your calculations, it should have been carried all the way down to the Alexander corner, which is also a wide frontage, but technically fronts on Alexander, we understand that. But from an appearance standpoint,
So
your mathematical numbers should probably go up because those distances are larger.
Okay, so first and foremost, it appears as though the lot depth of your lot would be lesser if I were to calculate it the other way, because the separation on the two lines is shorter. To answer your second point, Montclair's ordinance tells you to stop when you get to a street. So when you're analyzing your lot, the ordinance says go 2 lots to the left and 2 lots to the right, provided that they're in the same block in the same zone. So when your lot depth requirement is calculated, if you were fronting on Park, it would only include the 2 lots to your right, because there are no 2 lots to your left, despite the fact that there's a street there, and yes, the block continues. But that's not how the ordinance says to do it.
Okay, but we're balancing out ordinance and appearance and how we preserve the historic nature of Montclair, I think is what you're all charged with today, so thank you.
You're welcome.
There is a little tension rising in here. My name is John Barrett. I live 490 Park Street, and I want to ask a question. There's an old quote that I want to know if you've ever heard. If you torture data long enough, it will confess to anything you want it to. Have you ever heard that before?
I haven't.
Okay, I'll read it again.
Nor do I see how it's relevant here, Mr. Chairman.
If you torture data long enough, you just told that woman who lives 3 doors down that her house doesn't matter.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. I do it
Yeah,
just to preserve
this
our
is-
record. I mean, we don't know where this is going to end up, but I don't think this is appropriate.
This is to ask questions of
Okay,
this witness
that
about
was a question.
about his
Yeah,
testimony.
about his testimony, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you don't have to apologize for me.
How are you guys? I'm Patrick Wilson. I'm a neighbor as well. Yeah, that's me.
Welcome.
That's you.
It is.
Wish we met under better circumstances,
Me too, I
but
apologize.
yeah, I'm in front of people for a living as an actor and director. But this makes me nervous. But for right now, you said there'll be at the smallest point there'll be 14 feet between them.
14 point, no. house will be 14.6 feet from the property line. Our proposed house, we have the 10-foot setback to that side. So
Right.
there would be 24.6 feet between them, when by ordinance, there could be as little as 12.
Right. And do you know offhand the rest of the distances between those on each? I'm just trying to figure out why it looks like it's just so jammed in there, yet you seem to feel like it's got plenty of room.
Well, here's the proposed house.
Right.
So here's the house next door,
Right.
and the house next door to that.
Yep.
And we certainly have more space between
Well, you do in that
there
picture, but do you?
and there.
Well, again, these are just, you made these drawings. I'm just asking.
No.
No, those are, that's to scale?
Those are
Correct.
to scale
To scale.
based upon survey measurements. So the locations of these houses where they're shown and the images are based upon the photographs.
Gotcha.
Again, these are, we shot the corners of the house and we shot the elevation of the roof structure in every instance.
Gotcha.
So these are accurate to scale and are representations not only of where the houses are, but what the elevations of the houses are as they relate to one another.
Gotcha. I won't double down on the trees because I feel like we've certainly hit that, but it is strange to me that you knew the exact number of 21, yet you could have an arborist do a total count of the trees in about an hour and a half. So it confuses me why you don't know the number of trees on the property. That's alarming to me because it looks like, no, there are a bunch, but we're only going to remove 21. Right, but how many are there? That's just a question, but I don't think you have that answer. The other thing was to your point about the construction being done, are there, not that it's any of my business to see them, but are there blueprints to what is being done to the house? Because I feel like we've had this conversation about open windows and demolition by neglect. And sure, there are trucks out there removing things, but are there blueprints that are being handled that are going to make that house
Yes.
better?
I will have the applicant testify as to the work that's been done there so far.
Gotcha.
And in fact, there have been building permits submitted, plumbing, electrical, et cetera, et cetera. So the Montclair Building Department has full set of plans. The construction is progressing, and I will have the applicant speak to that.
Gotcha, no worries. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks, you guys.
I just have a question. So, Mr. Wilson pointed out that, the line of houses and the space between them. If you're looking at that picture on the right side that's not shown, what are the distances between the houses as you go to the right, the left side, excuse me,
side.
the other right?
The other right, okay. So yeah, this home actually crowds the property line today. We show that, hold on a second. Actually, we show the offset for that house on our survey. So this existing house is 3.43 feet off of the property line of our lot. So our lot line is like there. That house does not comply with your 6-foot minimum requirement. So is there a lot of space between that house and that house? Yup. Why? Because it doesn't meet the requirement today.
Actually, my question was, you're showing, what is it, 6 houses. If you continue down the block, what is the distance between the houses?
I
Which
don't-
way?
This way,
North or south?
north.
North.
Okay.
I don't have that information because that's not what your ordinance requires us to do.
Of course,
Yeah,
there's a
but-
street there.
Well, actually,
No, there's some.
no, there's still
some
more houses before you
yeah,
get to
yeah,
the street.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because, part of what we look at is the character of the neighborhood. And if the neighborhood continued as widely spaced homes as you go up the block, and then you're squishing in one little house there, that to me makes the neighborhood not what it looked like before you built the house.
I understand what you're saying. Your ordinance zones it as 80-foot wide lots. That's what your ordinance says it should be.
Don't we have the?
Now, to the
Do we
right,
have the tax map as part of one of the exhibits here that shows the overall area? And while the tax map is not to scale, it does show you approximately what the lots look like. And if
It
I'm
does.
recalling correctly, this was a transition area, where there's houses where the houses to the south were closer together, and the houses to the north were further apart. That's the way I recall it, but
I
we
guess
should
that's
have-
my point,
We should
yeah.
have them.
Yeah,
We should
in
have
here.
them. And this is the point where the transition, this lot is the point where the transition occurs. So we can, come back to that. We can take a look at that and come back to that. If you have more questions.
There's one more house, the corner lot is the one more house that would be to the north of this. There's 3 lots to the left of us before you get to Overlook. And we have 2 of them shown, we don't have the corner lot shown. And we have the 2 lots to the right of us, which are technically, while they're in the same zone, the requirements for those lots is 90-foot width, our requirement is 80. So this is actually a more restrictive area in terms of lot width than this is. And that's just what your ordinance says to do. It looks different, but that's not what your ordinance says.
Well, I can see where the prior speaker was a little frustrated by talking about the ordinance endlessly. When you walk down the block, you're seeing the character of the neighborhood looks like, and no one has the ordinance in their head, and whether this agrees or doesn't agree with the ordinance. But I understand our role is different, yeah.
Right.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
With respect to the houses, as to how the houses sit back from the street. This house that's proposed is going to sit back a little further than the house on either side of it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about the rest of the houses on the block? Is it going to be back further behind those houses, or going to be about parallel to them? It's not going to stick out further, closer to the street?
No, this house is actually closer than the existing house or the house immediately next door. Our house sits back a little bit in order to preserve the garden that's in front. That's the purpose.
And as to the rest of the houses on the street, does it sit closer to the street than any of the other houses on the block?
Doesn't appear to, no. The lots as we go to the south, these lots are deeper. But the
houses are still closer to the street?
Yeah.
Than the proposed construction?
Probably the next house back. So this is, here's our house.
When you say this, you need to
okay.
specify
So
what it is.
immediately to the subject property, this is the proposed house. This is the house immediately next door.
To the south?
To the south. No.
Or to the north?
To the south.
To the south.
And then this is the next house, which is a little bit more forward than the house next to us.
So again, the house that is being proposed to construct sits a little further back?
That is correct.
By
15, 20 feet maybe. Our proposed house has a setback as shown of 71.1 feet. The existing house is 47 on the property. And the requirement's 52.
How far back is the house on lot 27?
I don't know that I have an accurate answer for you. Let me just get to that.
It looks like it's in really small print on the handout that you gave us tonight, if that helps.
I wish my eyes were that good. I apologize.
What lot did you say, 32?
27.
I think it's 113, so it's also in very small font on this.
Okay.
And it looks to be 113.
I think it's about 113.
That's what this graphic would suggest.
I'm sorry, I got a bit lost there, so what was the conclusion?
It seems lot 27
Mhm.
per this diagram is about 113 feet from the street.
Okay.
And if it helps, lot 26 is about 48 feet.
And what's lot 28 while we're going on?
28, this roof. That one doesn't have a distance on it on this diagram. I don't have a distance on this diagram for that one. Yeah. What's on the screen?
Yeah, the sheet that's on the screen.
You can blow it, you blew it up on the computer.
Yeah, on the computer I can blow it up a bit better.
Hold on.
Which
It's
that's
on- It's on the
streetscape?
survey, and I can scale it from the survey, because the survey's 20 scale. Looks to be a little under 60, 59 and a half.
Further questions from the public? I think there were some other people who wanted to ask questions.
Hi, April Stratton. I'm also a neighbor. My question is, you showed a picture of the house that you want to put there with the roof line that you said will fit into the neighborhood nicely. So our neighborhood is 1890s, early 1900s, and then maybe mid-centuries that have all been beautifully preserved. How is a new construction going to fit into this landscape?
I think the lines of the new construction are appropriate for this area.
Use the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. I feel the lines are appropriate for this area. We have a recurring roof line that has some dormers in it up and down the street, and we created a similar roof line for this home.
So is there like a type of house that you're looking to create? Is it like an old farmhouse? Is it?
It's definitely not a farmhouse look. We were more farmhouse in our previous submittal. We had a porch. In this submittal, we have a recessed door, and we have kind of a classic center hall colonial look with windows to both sides that are mimicked, larger on the front, on the lower level, and smaller on the upper level, but mimicked and stacked in that same fashion.
Okay, so you think that this new construction will fit in with all of the other beautiful old homes in our neighborhood?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Debbie Moran. I live at 10 Elston Road. I walk past this house at least once every day. I'm walking my dog. I knew the Treens. Their house, I believe that the closing was in August of 2022. Anyway, irrespective of the variance to get another house built, time is money, and I really don't understand why there have only been random acts of renovation on the main house. I would have thought that independent of the seeking a variance, that the house itself, the original house, would have been fully renovated by now, and whether waiting to get a variance and sell it, that piece as well, and create a new house, I really wonder, I found it really strange that there have been such slow motion and truly random.
Can I ask you to maybe put a pin on that, because he didn't really testify about any of what you're stating, and counsel has already said that he's going to bring his client up, owner, to talk about the renovation and what's being done at the house, and I think maybe your question might be more appropriate for him.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Just one quick small point, Mr. Pietry, when we're talking front yard setbacks, is the list of front yard setbacks at the very bottom of this page accurate? The page that's on the screen, I should say, which I think is different than the hard copy you're looking at.
We actually analyzed front yard setback, and I'm trying to look for it on the plan itself, because that's what your ordinance requires us to do.
Yeah, that's the sheet that's on the screen, is S3. I think there's actually a table when we were just trying to scale things and look up tiny numbers, but I think there's a table that has them all there.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out for everybody. Miss?
All right, I'm going to try this again. So Margot Walter, 543 Park Street, corner of Park and Alexander. So I don't know whether to address this question to the council or to you, which, by the way, love the tie.
Thank you.
Santa. If this house is approved, if this project's approved, and then somebody comes along who has bought the Treen's house, let's say, the former Treen's house, and they now want to subdivide the lot to the south, would the fact that this lot has been approved and this ordinance allowance that y'all, this ordinance, calculation that y'all do, would it make it an easier argument for the second house to be approved? Because now you've got this many houses, and now the essential lots, there's one really much smaller lot that skews the requirement for the next lot smaller. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but to me, it would be this same situation as what they originally proposed. They would run into the same issues about the location of the house and the distance between the house. So unless they put something that was very small, maybe they might be able to do something. But then again, it becomes whether or not that would be something that would be economically viable for a developer to put a tiny house
True.
on that lot. But what they were talking about, part of the issue with the last, with the previous iteration of this application, where there was a house there, was that it was crowding the house to the north, and then you're putting it back in that same situation. And that had nothing to do with these setbacks and the lots, because the issues that really were problematic with that application was the width of the lot and how a construction there was going to impact the two existing homes. So you've got that same exact situation.
Right.
Now, you might get a different board, you might hear, anything's possible, but again, you're going back to that same situation that they tried before that we kind of didn't like.
Well, I'm glad.
And they
but-
got the message for that and they removed it.
Right. But I guess my point is, or my question is for the council to consider that as part of your deliberations, that each time we subdivide something into smaller and smaller pieces, we are changing the character. So, and I know you know that, so that was my question. Thanks.
Other questions from the public?
Howard Marcus. I live at 41 Fairview Place, which is directly behind the proposed home. My backyard is a hill. My kids and their friends go sledding down it. It's so steep in the winter. So my concern is with your drainage system. I'm not familiar with drainage systems. How far back is this from the fence? And how does this water drain? I'm not getting a clear picture of where that water is going.
Okay, so
Can you go back to the drawing that shows where it's on, and that might help your explanation and also help.
Okay. So your lot is back here?
Yeah.
Okay. And the system is here. It's a subsurface system that would percolate into the ground, provided we get percolation. So from the back of that system, to the property line, is probably about 50 feet at its closest point.
From the system to?
The property line.
Okay.
And then there is an overflow from that system that comes down behind the fence line to where it goes, in essence, today. Everything continues to run down the hill, so.
And
ultimately, it runs down through those properties and to the next street and is picked up in the drainage system in that street.
If it's not absorbed
Right.
on the way down.
You're talking about, he keeps mentioning.
How could it be if it's in a pipe?
No. You're talking about overflow,
Correct.
sheet flow, surface flow, anything that doesn't get into the pipe. So basically, the charge of the ordinances is to definitely not make it matters worse as a result of the construction,
Correct.
They may not make it better, but it's definitely can't make it worse. So you can't increase the sheet flow off of the property.
That is correct.
But the object of what you're trying to do is to absorb the new increase in flow by what may be caused by the construction of impervious surface on the subject property.
Correct.
So what that means is that he's trying to say that you shouldn't get any more water than you get today on your property, but you're going to get runoff. Everybody gets runoff downhill. There's a certain amount of water that doesn't get absorbed into the ground. And it depends, too, on the time of year, and it depends on how much rain it is. Like the rain that we had yesterday evening, I never get water in my backyard. I've been at that property for at least the past 20 years. Once I got water, maybe about 15 years ago. Well, this morning I had water ponded in my backyard because the water came down so heavily. And I live at the bottom of a hill. And it's coming from all the houses that are to the west of me, down the hill. And that's the natural flow of things. And so you should, normally speaking, unless there's something catastrophic or there's something very heavy, an unusual storm, the water gets absorbed into the ground before it has a chance to pond in my backyard. And so that's the normal way of things. And so what the ordinances require with respect to runoff is that they can't make the situation of the surrounding properties worse. They don't have to improve it, but they can't make it worse. So if all of this works properly, and that's what the ordinances are designed to do, then you should get the same amount of runoff today that you get today that you would if this project were to be constructed.
Well, I'm going to miss that. Is there a pipe that the water is directed through a pipe?
The water is directed into the water is directed into a series of subsurface pipes. Those pipes are set in stone. The goal is to have that water perk into the ground. There's an overflow pipe from that system that comes out to what's called a scour hole. A scour hole is a depression that's lined with riprap so that it dissipates the velocities so that the water doesn't cause erosion going as it continues to sheet flow down the hill.
Okay.
And that's to the west. Those pipes are basically to the west of
Correct.
what we're talking about, towards the Verona side.
No.
Or
No,
is it
down the hill.
To the east.
To the
It
east.
comes down the hill.
Right down the hill.
But from where it enters the driveway, though, all of this happens to the west of your property, and it happens to the west of the system, right?
Well, I mean,
In other words, go up to the board, point on the map where the pipes are.
this is the subsurface system.
Right.
There are pipes that come from the house and from the garage and tie into the subsurface system.
Right.
There's a storm structure in the driveway that ties into the subsurface system. The overflow pipe comes out of the subsurface system, down the hill to a scour hole at the back of the property. And that's how virtually every one of these has been done in the last 39 years that I've been doing it.
Mr. Pietry, though, you said the system is used if you get the correct perk, right?
The system will recharge if we get the correct perk. If it can't recharge, then what has to happen is we have to put in what's called an outlet structure. So basically, it holds the water back, fills up the pipes with water, and only lets it discharge at the same rate it does today. So it's the rate of runoff. It's how much water is coming out at a time.
The
not how-
percolation is the absorption of the water
and I
into
get
the.
it.
So
Yeah.
it's not your ordinance, trust me, because the state wrote the ordinances and made all the towns adopt them or told them either adopt our ordinances or you're going to lose your funding. And so every town now has ordinances that are very similar in nature. Montclair's is a little stricter. But it's specifically stricter in steep slopes areas such as this.
Just having lived there for 10 years, there's not a lot of runoff that I visibly see. There is a lot of brush back there, at least there was up until this morning when 3 trees did come down and took down the power line. So whatever comes back is absorbed with whatever brush and trees are there. So there aren't many issues right now. So this is a concern.
And that's what the system is designed to keep it as it is now for your property. by absorbing more on the property and compensating for the increased pavement and impervious surface.
Is that tested at some point?
Yes.
Make sure?
Yes,
Yeah.
it has to be tested and it has to be certified by a lab. There's a soils lab. You take samples, you send them to a soils lab, they do what's called a permeability test, and they send results. So we don't certify the results. The soils lab certifies the results, and they say, this is the perk rate of the soil.
And that's for the state
That is.
or for the town?
That information gets attached to our report and submitted to the town. So if it doesn't perk, we still have to give the review engineer, whether it's Mr. Tenkate or whether it's Neglia, who does your reviews for stormwater management for your building projects. It's somebody's going to review it, and somebody looks at those numbers besides us.
Hi, I'm Eileen McGeever. I live north of 509, so I would be right next door to the proposed new dwelling. You know what I mean? So here's 509, here's the woods, and here's me. Okay? So I don't want to belabor the point. I know we've talked about it a lot, but a man-made thing, human ingenuity is great, but that water is being displaced rather than drunk, for lack of a better word. Like, the trees actually take it, whereas this makes it Grove Street's problem. You know what I mean?
It doesn't function that way because that detention center, how does the detention center work?
So the system is designed, assuming we can recharge, assuming we have percolation, and it's all going to be according to what the soils tell us when we dig test pits there. If the soil will take the water, then we will recharge it into the soil, and it'll go into the earth like it does today. Down to
Where
the
does it
aquifer.
go into the earth?
At an elevation at the
No.
bottom.
On the
okay.
map, the areas
Yeah. So
where it goes into the
this
earth.
is the system. So that is where it will go into the earth.
And right now, the rate of percolation for that area of ground as it is today is what?
One inch, right? 1 inch, you said?
No, that's the minimum that you're allowed to use.
It's not going to be what that drainage system is, that your engineering is designed to be, right? It's less than that, right?
Right.
Because if it was the same, they wouldn't need to put that additional drainage system there. The ground would absorb the water. They are increasing the ability of the ground in that area to absorb water by creating an artificial system that allows the water to go into the ground more quickly to compensate for the loss of the trees and the impervious surface.
No, I do understand that point. I'm just wondering. So I'm this house. See that little square over here? That's me. We get water in our basement. We get water. We had to build a retaining wall in front of our front door because otherwise we would have had to put up sandbags for it not to come in the house because we're on a slope.
Right.
And I mean, last night, my front yard was completely like underwater close to my front door last night. So, and I mean, the way things are going, it's only going to get worse. So I understand how this works. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be better to have something that actually gets rid of the water versus just moves it? I know it goes in the ground,
yeah,
I do, but there's a water table. And when the ground is flooded, it's flooded.
Right, but right now, the ground is not able to absorb the water at the rate that
That this can
system-
absorb the water.
Right, so it will be able to absorb it and dissipate it
Pull
more
it
quickly.
and send it through the
No,
pipes.
it doesn't, it only sends the overflow through the pipes. Whatever the ground can't absorb then gets channeled into the pipes to go down further into the system so that it can be absorbed at the back end of the system. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm kind of a big believer in talking about what we're talking about. So, I mean, I think it's important to point out that they're not going to get a permit to build anything, no matter what our board does or doesn't decide, unless they satisfy the township engineers that the runoff is not going to be any worse than it is now. And so all of this very interesting talk about drainage, the point is, they haven't got an actual plan to build something. When they do, they then need to run it through a whole bunch of approval processes in the town, and they have to satisfy the town engineer that the runoff is not going to be any worse.
And that's why he said that this is just a, what did you call it?
Conceptual
A
grading
conceptual plan. This is the way that they think it will operate.
Right.
If when they actually get out there and something else comes up, proves them wrong, they have to design something in addition so that it will function the way that this is supposed to function. The actual construction of it may differ because of whatever physical conditions are there that won't allow this to create the rate of percolation that is necessary. But at the end of the day, whatever they do has to create that minimum amount of percolation, which has been determined should not exacerbate the problems off of the property, should be able to absorb the runoff that's created by the impervious surface, and will not make things worse in your yard as a neighbor. It may not solve your problem. It might solve your problem.
I don't think it will. I'm not concerned about
But it may not solve
mine.
your problem, but it should not make your problem worse.
Yeah,
And that's the town engineer has to go back and make sure that, and certify that this is going to work to meet those state/town standards.
But just for purposes of, so for people who are not used to coming to the planning board and doing this, just for the sake, just so everybody knows kind of what's going to happen next. I know a lot of you are here because you want to make general comments about this. We're not going to get to the general comment part of the evening until we get through this witness's testimony.
Okay.
So that's why I'm just saying that, you know, we can talk about drainage for another 2 hours, but if
But
we
it's
talk
all
about drainage for another
theoretical
2
anyway.
hours, it's going to, so what's going to happen is the chairman's, after everybody's done questioning this witness, the chairman will ask the applicant to move on to the next thing, and then at some point, we'll get to comments from the public, and then the board will discuss.
Right. And I just want you to, kind of want you to understand the testimony, because Mr. Pietry's been a little technical.
Sorry.
And so it's, if, you know, we understand it because we've heard this more, so we've learned the lessons about how these things work and they're supposed to work. But sometimes the very technical language about discharge and percolation and stuff like that, it sounds like it's just moving it from one place to another, and it's not. It's trying to absorb it where it's coming in the area on this property. It's trying to keep that water on this property to absorb into the ground underneath this property. And this is how they've designed to do it. That's the object of the system that's been designed, is to keep the water on this product, not to shunt it down to Grove Street or off onto neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the public of Mr. Pietry? Okay. Counselor? Another witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call my next witness, It's the applicant and property owner, Mr. Nathan Rozen.
Mr. Piramali?
Of course. Nathan, have a seat.
Free legal advice.
I know, I got you. Nathan, would you spell your name and give your business address for the record?
Nathan Rozen.
And would you spell Rozen, please?
R-O-Z-E-N.
Mr. Neese, would you like to swear him in? If you'd be kind enough, he would prefer to affirm as opposed to swear
I
to tell the
understand.
truth.
Sir, would you raise your right hand?
No.
I think you can do that. Sir, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And you've already stated your name. Are you affiliated with the applicant, sir?
I am the applicant.
Mr. Rozen, do you own 509 Park Street LLC, the business entity which owns 509 Park Street, the subject property of this application?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rozen, I'll keep your testimony brief. Frankly, there were some concerns raised about the current construction that's being done at 509 Park, the existing dwelling at 509 Park, Would you please speak to the ongoing construction that's going on there, your efforts to obtain building permits from the Township of Montclair, what the progress has been to date, and when do you anticipate construction will be completed?
Yes, what happened was we bought this property in August of 22, end of August, I believe it was August 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a big project. Anyone who's seen the house, it's a tremendous home. It's about, including the basement, it's about 10,000 square feet. So I had my team, my GC, my architect, my local designer, Adriana Smith, my agent. We all went through the property. The property, the way it used to be like there's tons of doors, and they used to have maids' quarters. So the whole back of the house was like different. There was different sets of steps. It's a big project, so we had to get architecturals. Architecturals, August 22nd, at that time was September, was around our holidays. That set him back. My architect is also Jewish. That set us back. I believe we got the permits after all the back and forth with the designers and everyone. I think they went in sometime around November. I don't remember the exact date, but it was in the middle of November, if I'm not mistaken. We did not get granted our permits until April 11th. I think that was the date. It was definitely in April. I'm pretty sure it was April 11th. So why the town took forever, there was back and forth, I don't know. Was I happy about it? No. Did it cost me a ton of money? Yes. But that was from April. Now is already December. It's a very large project. We had to redo almost all the plumbing in the home. We had to redo, I believe, almost all the electric in the home. We put in 3 new HVAC zones. There was only one there that wasn't really working, and we added 2, so now there's 3 brand new zones. We did an extensive amount of demo because we had to reconfigure all the kitchen, the master, for today's, what people want to live in today, based on my designer's input. And we had to add a bathroom here, and it's a tremendous amount of work. We had to resheet, we had to redo some of the subfloors. We passed, thank God, we passed the rough plumbing inspection and the rough electrical inspection. We had a rough building inspection this past Thursday, actually. He actually, from what I was told by my GC, he actually liked the framing work, but we needed an update on the architecturals because he hadn't seen some stuff. So I spoke to my architect. He's supposed to have those plans redone for me shortly, get that back into the building department, get it re-inspected. Hopefully they pass us, and then we can move on to the second half, the fun part of actually doing all the finishes. I intend this to be a beautiful home, what it is. It's a tremendous home, and my intention is that it should be more beautiful than when I bought it, much more beautiful, I hope.
And specifically to that point, there's been some comments with regard to your intentions for the home. Is there any reason that you could think why you would want to negatively impact the home or in some way take part in demolition by neglect, I think is the phrase that's been utilized by
there is no reason at
members of the
all.
public?
Unfortunately, I don't live here, so I'm not here every day to see which windows are open or not. I've told my contractor that I was actually there before the meeting and everything was locked up, except for one thing, I had to close it up. But he's been more on top of it after we heard the comments. Because from what I heard, I don't live here, so I come here, but I'm not on site every day. I live about over an hour away. So as much as I try to get here, I can't get here every day to check on the windows. It's not feasible. That being said, obviously, I want it done quicker than probably anyone here. I am very unhappy how long it took. This is probably the longest any project's ever taken me, albeit it is the biggest project I've done based on the condition of the home, the age of the home, the township issues, et cetera, et cetera. But by all means, we anticipate it to be a beautiful home, and all the neighbors, when it's finished, can come and take a look at it.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions of this witness. I open them up to the board and then the public.
Questions from the board?
I guess you bought this home knowing it was a one-family home, correct?
Correct.
And was your intention to apply for what you're doing? When you bought the home, you're taking the risk.
Correct.
Of whether you'll get a variance to split it into 3 lots.
I did not know if I would get the subdivision.
Yeah.
I was hoping I would.
Yeah.
But
that was your intention when you bought the home?
It wasn't
to...
Well, I was hoping it would be, I don't know, I was hoping it would be fiscally responsible to buy it, even if I didn't get the subdivision. But I was definitely why I spent a lot of money and why I'm here to try to get the subdivision.
Just a follow-up question, Mr. Rozen. Did you end up maybe biting off more than you could chew? Did this project cost you more than you originally anticipated?
Yes. It's costing me more than I anticipated. Hopefully it'll work out. I mean,
Did you investigate any other lots that are similar that were granted approval for subdivision before you bought this?
I actually spoke to Mr. Gassion from
our firm,
from their
Gassion
firm,
Promaco, Robert
and he
Gassion.
actually went down to the site, and I spoke to Mr. Pietry as well. I don't remember if this was pre-closing or post, but I had a good idea. I went through the zoning. I actually spoke to your zoning officer about it, and I looked at the zoning, and I seemed to me like, as per Mr. Gassion, he thought originally we could get even one lot on each side, which we thought was almost all conforming, and we thought it was quite a good application. So, which is why I felt pretty good about it.
Other questions from the board? Questions from the public?
Thank you. Thank you. My name is John Barrett. Mr. Rozen, do you have any other properties in Montclair?
Yes.
Yes? Could you describe them?
In terms of?
The number of properties, and give us perhaps examples?
I have two other properties. One of them, in my opinion, is beautiful.
I'm sure.
And the other one
What's the address on that?
I'd rather not disclose that if I don't need to, at least not in public.
I'm trying to get a sense. This is our town.
It's on Woodmont.
What's that?
It's on Woodmont Road, right
Okay.
near Park, and I have another one in North Mountain.
Okay.
One of them is finished, and one of them, it's going on the market soon.
Okay.
And one of them is almost finished. The kitchen went, I mean, you know, the cabinets went in today, they're in the middle of tiling, so we should be finishing up there in a few weeks.
So this is the third house in Montclair?
I've done others in the past.
Can you describe any of those?
In terms of I did a house on Chestnut.
Okay.
It was a two-family, we turned it into a one-family, we redid the entire home, or whatever. I use that word loosely. We did a house on Tishner way back. We did a house on Marion a couple years back. I did a house on Cambridge. That might have been a Glenridge address. It was right on the border, 27 Cambridge. And
Did you do anything on Christopher Street?
I did, yes.
Tell me about that.
I bought a home and I sold it.
That's it?
Can you give us some indication of where you're going with this?
Sure. There's a public record at 199 Christopher Street that I'm sure the attorney is well aware of, that there probably is some backstory. I'm just wondering why you didn't offer up Christopher Street after those 6, 7, 8 other addresses.
Well, again, I'm trying to understand the relevance of, because he didn't testify about any of this, so you're asking him questions beyond his testimony, and I'm giving you leeway here, but where are you going with this?
Because
What's the point?
The
of the
point
questions?
is, and I'll save it for the public comments, maybe I should do that.
Well, I mean, do you want to make a comment, or do you want to ask him questions?
No, I'm curious to find out where other people who had properties, there's 20 homeowners here that have a vested interest in this. I know it's a financial issue for Mr. Rozen, but it's a neighborhood issue for us. So I'm just trying to find, if I could have known all these addresses, I would have knocked on the doors and asked how the people felt about the drainage, about the work that was done, about the credibility.
But you're not going to do that this evening.
No, I understand that.
So I suspect that your point is better made in a comment.
Okay.
Than, giving him the third degree to get information out that basically is going to take you right to that point where it's going to be your comment on what that might be, because there is absolutely, at this point, no opportunity for you to knock on doors and get other people in here to talk to us.
You're right. Thank you very much. I'm new at this as well.
No problem.
Just another question. Have you done any subdivisions before in Montclair?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the public? All right, Counselor.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further witnesses this evening.
Okay. So at this stage of the proceedings, it's appropriate for the public to make statements and comments about the application, one way or the other, application as a whole. Why don't we pick up where we just left off, since we know that it's there? And had I known that we were going right to there, I would have just told you to hold your spot.
I appreciate it. I borrowed a sign from the back, and I will replace it. And I will have the committee listen as I read it. Small steps make big differences. We were here 3 months ago. I shared stories about growing up in a little town called Bayside, Queens. It was a great suburban town that went through something just like this. One big home knocked down, 3 two-family homes put in. If we put that slide up again, could we ask somebody to put that first slide up that showed the houses? The challenge is one small step makes big differences. You probably have 25 homeowners that surround this property. The challenge is one small step, one variance here. By the way, you're probably aware, and Chairman, I'm not asking you to make a decision for a future board or a future committee. Can I ask you for the one with the pictures on the bottom? Sorry, thanks. The house next door is also in the exact same scenario. Owned by an LLC, also being neglected. This is the home we're talking about?
You need the mic so the audience on television can hear you.
Thank you. This is the home we're talking about. This is the home we're talking about. This home is being neglected as well. I promise you, within 48 months, that will be the same exact scenario. So we're talking about 4 houses where 2 currently sit. We're talking about historic buildings, historic properties, streetscape, surrounded by 25 homeowners. I understand business, believe me. I understand it is a business. It's changing our neighborhood. And if small steps do make big differences, I put it to the committee to think about that. If we can have a certified city of Montclair in celebration of its commitment to being pet friendly, this is our street. This is our neighborhood. We want kids to take bikes to school, to Northeast, to Watchung. You're going to double the traffic. We had a fatality on Park Street, I don't know, 90 days ago? 4 weeks ago? Little things matter. That's the committee. That's
John.
what we're asking of the committee.
John, is your argument this project, or is your argument slippery slope?
Is
Is your main concern the project that we're here to talk about tonight, or is your main problem slippery slope?
It's a little of both. It's a little of both. This project is a big deal. It's got the historic gardens, which anybody has seen, people have testified. It's a unique part of Montclair. And it is a slippery slope.
Other members of the public wish to be heard. Now's the time.
This is Tyler Zaberl again from Spyro Harrison and Nelson on behalf of Brad Stratton at 500. Actually have a planner here, Peter Steck, to testify.
You should have spoken up earlier, Counselor.
Apologies.
Because, we kind of moved on past that. Here, we've opened it up to comment. So I'll let you backtrack. But now we've got to backtrack for the testimony and the cross-examination and for further comment.
I apologize.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Peter G. Steck, S-T-E-C-K, planning consultant at 80 Maplewood Avenue, Maplewood, New Jersey.
Mr. Steck, can you take us through some of your educational background?
We are very familiar with Mr. Steck. You don't have to qualify him.
Okay.
We know who he is.
Can I ask that the board accept Mr. Steck as a professional planner?
He was our planner in Montclair at one time. We know who he is. We will accept him.
Does the, no objection from the applicant?
And my license,
No objection from the applicant.
and my license happens to still be in effect. I have a handout that might be helpful to the board.
We'll mark this as 01.
I'll just describe for the record what it is, and then I'll refer to it as I go through my testimony. 01 was prepared by me. It's dated December 17th of this year, and it consists of 4 pages. The first page has a 2020 satellite photo where I've inserted certain numbers in yellow and highlighted the subject property. It's an infrared photo, so the trees tend to disappear in it, and you can see approximately where the houses are. Those yellow numbers are, and I'll talk about them later, are lot widths. The second page is the applicant's current plan, where I've simply colored the trees in green, so it's more apparent where they go. And while the applicant chose to put X's on trees that were to be removed, I simply put a red shape around them. So those are the trees that are removed because that's where the driveway is going to go. The next page on 01 is as P3 in the upper right-hand corner. These are photographs taken by me on December 15th of this year, and in my opinion, they accurately depict existing conditions. The upper photograph is where the proposed new lot and house is to be located. The lower photograph is on the north side of the property, so the existing house is on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, you see the house to the north that apparently is in an LLC. And then on the fourth page, I reproduced a portion of the tax maps and I superimposed the width standards from the zoning map. So back to the beginning. This is a large property. It's irregular in shape. And as indicated, it has historic attributes. It has been, as you know, before the Historic Commission, even though this is not in a formal district. It is at the T intersection of Glenwood Road, so it's very prominent. Someone driving at that T intersection, gets a good look at what the house currently is. There's a footnote on the engineering plan that says the lot width is measured at the front lot line. And while at that time that was how you measured things in Montclair, Montclair inserted a new definition of how you measure lot width. And you no longer measure it at the front lot line, at the street right-of-way line, you measure it at the setback. And I would suggest to you, but by the time this application was declared complete, that new definition was in effect. So in my opinion, number one, you measure the width. So the applicant is saying, for example, oh, we're proposing a 100-foot wide new lot. The answer is, in my judgment, it's a 93-foot wide lot measured at the setback line. I also note that this is, while the applicant has not refiled, this is a substantially different application than was started last month. There's not a reduced number of lots. The new lot line didn't exist before. So that's the second reason why the definition of lot width has changed, and in my opinion, the applicant needs to address that. And I think it makes sense because it responds to the visual view of the street. So on 01, page 1, I approximated what the widths of the lot widths were as you see them from Park Street. I'll note that Mr. Pietry is right, that on Overlook Road, because the narrow frontage is oriented to the north, to the right on the diagram, that's the lot width. But as everyone knows, visually that house fronts on Park Street. And as you can see from the numbers there, measured at the setback line, the proposed lot is only 93 feet, in my opinion, under the new definition. I don't have the computers that Mr. Pietry did, but I made my best effort at scaling it appropriately. I'll tell you what, I have my own with lemon in it, so that's very good. I upped you by one. Thank you. This is non-alcoholic. The other issue is lot depth. Mr. Pietry says, well, there are 4 non-conforming lot depths now, and we're not going to make the number anymore. Your ordinance says that lot depth applies to new lots. So all of those lots that are on Park Street in this block that are existing lots and have houses in them, they're all conforming. The ordinance talking about looking at the depth 2 lots to the right and 2 lots to the left, that only applies when you're subdividing. So today, all of those lots are conforming in depth. When the applicant proposes this subdivision, they will be creating a nonconformity because that section of the ordinance only applies when you're subdividing lots. The other thing I want to emphasize, and it's by way of history, at one time Montclair had its standards for lot depth and width in a separate map, not the zoning map. It was part of the subdivision ordinance. And at that time, granting relief was a waiver or an exception that had less of a stringent proof than a variance. What has happened is that Montclair took those standards out of the subdivision ordinance, where relief would have been exceptions or under the municipal land use law or waivers, and Montclair put them in the zoning ordinance. So now you have a different set of proofs that are more strict. So there is a theme here that these standards were shifted, even though the numbers didn't change, they were shifted in the ordinance that they were in, with the result is it's harder, in my opinion, to get relief by way of a variance than it is from a setback. Excuse me, a variance than a waiver where it was part of the subdivision ordinance. A continuing theme in this master plan, last amended in 2023, is to promote and protect existing residential character and form in established neighborhoods. This is clearly an established neighborhood. Your current master plan really didn't concentrate on residential areas. You have to go way back years and years ago, and actually that was the plan that I worked on. Because the applicant...
I'm sorry, Mr. Steck, are you saying that you're saying the master plan character form, that doesn't apply to residential?
No, if you read your master plan, it concentrated on transportation and the business areas.
Yeah.
And the last master plan that intentionally looked at the whole town was years ago. But your current master plan repeats goals from the past. And one of those goals is to
Right.
preserve the character of a
Okay,
neighborhood.
that's what I thought.
So I'm not dodging that, it's a technical point. So the applicant needs there are existing conditions mentioned, which is the setback of the existing house, and I certainly don't have a problem with that. And in fact, it's not really a variance because it's existing. The standard for, again, lot depth only kicks in when you are subdividing a lot, and it's a movable feast. You know, wherever you pick a lot that you're going to subdivide, then you look 2 houses to the left and 2 houses to the right, and that determines what the setback of the new dwelling is to be.
And just to confirm, you're saying those 2 houses on either side are considered conforming?
Yes, in my opinion, they're conforming because they're not being subdivided.
Okay, and they're pre-existing?
Yes.
Is that the interpretation? Arthur, do you agree with that interpretation? Yes. Thank you.
So,
They're under that scenario.
So the applicant needs to show either that there is a hardship, practical difficulties, or that the benefits of this subdivision and the variance that's created substantially outweigh the detriments. In my opinion, your ordinance sets up minimum standards, minimum depth, minimum area, et cetera, It doesn't set maximums. It doesn't say too large a lot is really bad for the town.
They became conforming.
And in my opinion, because this property for so long has been developed with one large house, you would say an oversized house, except not oversized for the quality, the character of that property, there is reasonable use of the property today. So in my opinion, there is not a hardship or practical difficulty. The variance is triggered because the applicant wants to do something different, wants to subdivide the property. I see no public benefits that substantially outweigh the detriments. I'll grant you the neighborhood isn't going to collapse if this subdivision is granted, but while one of the sets of proofs is what is the negative criteria? Why would this be substantially detrimental to the public good, or why would it substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance? That has to be looked at the same time as what is the hardship, and I say there is none, and what are the public benefits of this subdivision, and I say there are none, in my opinion, when you look at the change in the character. I think that the applicant has not provided substantial, credible testimony that would justify this variance either under a C1 hardship or a C2 benefits substantially outweigh the detriments. It is the burden of the applicant to do that.
Mr. Steck, did you state what the detriments were, or did I miss it?
There are, the answer is that the detriment is granting a variance where there's no justification for it.
That's the detriment.
That's the
Okay.
Well, can I ask another
just so
question?
I can understand.
Yeah. There's another detriment that you're establishing a precedent for other large lots in Montclair to be so subdivided.
You, by its very nature, you don't set a precedent. Every application is on its own. Let me suggest to you what other detriments will arise, because there are other ways to do this. I don't think there is substantial credible testimony that would allow this board to approve this application. But let's say you don't believe me. Let's say you want to accommodate one lot. Let me give you some alternate scenarios. Instead of subdividing off the southerly side, why not subdivide off the northerly side?
We already discussed that. That was the beginning of this application. You are aware of that, right?
Yes, I was here at the last meeting.
So.
But if you'll
they're
let me
not doing-
testify.
But they're not gonna do that now. We know that they could do it, but they're still gonna run in, didn't we just discuss this like 15 minutes ago?
They'd run into
20
the
minutes
T-bar?
ago? That they're still gonna run into the same situation that they ran into
First of
last
all-
time they were here.
Respectfully, he's just trying to offer alternatives.
Yeah, Counselor, I understand.
Okay.
But I also understand Mr. Steck's expertise.
Well, if
And
would
so
you let
I'm
me
trying to get an
display?
I'm trying to get an understanding of Mr. Steck's actual testimony, okay?
Okay, maybe if I finish, it might answer some of the questions you have.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not, though.
Yes.
That's why I stopped you and asked you a question.
Yes. So if a lot were subdivided at the north end, and you can see from O1, first of all, there are fewer trees there that will be removed. While the applicant said that, well, there's only a 10-foot setback and that house in the LLC is close to the property line.
And there's a garden there.
Not on the north side is not, the garden.
But you said you said to move the driveway.
No, we're talking about the north end of the lot first,
Okay.
okay? If a lot was put there, across the street are homes that are 70 feet wide. So if you look at the corridor as being both sides of Park Street, that lot would face lots across the street that are similar in width. In fact, this would be a larger lot in width.
Yeah, but you could also look at that differently, Mr. Steck. I get what you're saying. No,
In all due respect, I just want to, you can ask me anything you want, but let me finish my sentences, if I may.
Well, no, I mean, I could do that, Mr. Steck, but you're not one to give answers that are at odds with how you intend to testify from the very beginning, all right? So I'm just trying to understand where you're going with your testimony, and it seems like you're raising basically technical issues, and now you're going to start going into possibilities that could come up that really aren't before us right now, okay? And we could go on for hours and spend all night with that, and it's still not going to get us to the point of this particular application. So I'm trying to get you to boil it down to brass tacks as to exactly what you're trying to say to us.
In my opinion, if you had a lot on the northern, I don't think the lot should be subdivided.
Clearly.
But if the board is inclined, for whatever reason, a lot at the northern end makes sense to me. First of all, if you approve this as proposed, in my opinion, you are entitled to put a condition on it that there be no further subdivision, because the reason you might entertain this subdivision is that this is the end of it, just 2 lots. In my opinion, you don't want to prove this with all that you've heard and then all of a sudden have the applicant come in next month with a subdivision of the remainder large lot. I think a lot could be crafted at the northern end that with less tree removal, that would put the driveway on the north side, which would be a way to separate the 2 houses, and it's across the street from lots that are 70 feet wide, narrower than this. Let's go to the third alternative, which is what is being proposed.
So can I ask you just a question about what you've testified to so far?
Yes.
Are you saying that you do think that the lot could be subdivided successfully that way?
It
Did I
would
understand
require
that
a
correctly?
variance, but it would be, if the board were to decide that the applicant is entitled by the proofs to an additional lot, in my opinion, a lot on the north end is less onerous than a lot on the south end. The lot on the south end now I'm going to the third alternative, could be made larger without creating a variance, could maybe be 8 feet wider. You could have the driveway on the north side of that concept house and avoid the garden. The most, aside from the principal dwelling,
Hang on
what
a
the
second.
public
Counselor,
sees.
where does your client live?
He lives at 500 Park.
So this testimony would move the house to the opposite side of where your client is? I just want to make sure we're all.
No, that's correct.
I just wanted to.
It sounds
got it.
selfish, but I'm just telling you.
It sounds,
from the planning board.
it sounds like what it sounds like. I just wanted to get it on
Okay.
the record.
A lot to the south could be made larger, wider than is being proposed without creating a variance. You could put the driveway on the north side of that concept house. It would avoid the garden that's in front. And frankly, in terms of the historic aspects of this, prime is the dwelling that's there. Everyone sees it. It's a beautiful dwelling. The outbuilding that's in the northeast corner, it's at a lower elevation. No one knew it was there. You can't see this. But what the public appreciates is the garden that's surrounded by the brick wall on the south side. So what I'm saying is you can, if this is the subdivision you're going for, in my opinion, to minimize the disturbance of trees, you could put the driveway on the north side of that dwelling. You could widen the lot by 8 feet. It would still be conforming, except for the lot depth issues, and it would be, it would still preserve the most prominent feature there, which is the brick garden in the front, the tea garden, and it would accommodate a dwelling. The applicant happens to show you a dwelling that maxes the property, as indicated. If the garage touched the house, all of a sudden it'd be too tall. So this is a big house. So, summary, I think there is a basis to deny this application based on the testimony that was presented. I think that's what the board should do. If you come to a different conclusion, I happen to think, and again, I told my client, look, they're going to look at this and say you're selfish. You know, you just want to subdivide on the other side. I told them that. They're going to say that. But what my opinion is that a lot on the northern side would fit in better, and it would solve the problem of the abutting LLC lot. Because that house is in bad shape, something's going to happen to that lot. If you subdivide this, but and don't put a restriction of no further subdivision, by taking 50 feet over off of this larger lot, you will now have 2 new lots to the north that will encourage demolition. That's looking ahead to the future, and in my opinion, that's a worse scenario. That would be solved by creating the new lot on the northern end. Thank you.
Questions for the board?
Before questions from the board, Mr. Piramali, do you want to have questions?
Mr. Neese, I have no affirmative questions of Mr. Steck, but I would like a brief moment to redirect with my witness, Mike Pietry, just to speak to the ordinance provisions that Mr. Steck spoke of. I just want to clarify the fact that the ordinance provisions that we did use with regard to lot width were correct and appropriate at the time that we filed, and this application was deemed complete. I don't see any reason why we should be required to refile just because we changed the subdivision from 3 lots to 2 lots. So I would like to get that on the record, just that.
That's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
My only point is when the application was declared complete, the new ordinance was in effect, which determined a different way of measure lot width.
But what existed, and I may have misspoken in response to your question, but what existed are pre-existing nonconformities. They still exist as pre-existing nonconformities, correct?
What exists?
The lots, the other lots.
The standard only, the standard of lot
To
depth
new lots.
in the ordinance only applies when you're going to subdivide.
Right.
And that's not only the title of that paragraph, it's in the body of the regulation.
So then how would you interpret, in this situation, this subdivision as proposed? What would be the analysis?
The analysis that I'm trying to address is that Mr. Pietry testified that there are like 4 non-conforming depth lots now, and there will be 4 non-conforming depth lots in the future.
You're saying
The
this
answer
creates
is,
one
right
non-conforming
now,
lot?
there are no non-conforming depth lots because the depth standard only kicks in when you subdivide.
So this would create one non-conforming lot?
Yes.
Is that the testimony?
Yes.
Is that accurate, Mr. Neese?
That's, you and I agree.
Right.
So this would create one, not 5 non-conforming lots?
One.
if we
Well, we didn't create the others.
Understood. No, I fully understand. These homes have been here for a long time. I understand.
You got a complex going on?
After a couple more meetings like this, I will have one.
So would, so in our analysis, we have to treat this as one non-conforming, and it would be setting a precedent if we were to consider those other 4 lots when we consider this lot as well, when we consider allowing this non-conformity. I mean, one of the arguments was that there are these 4 existing lots. They have non-conformities. This lot would create one that has a depth that would also be non-conforming when viewed with the other 4 lots, right?
I think it's just a rationality, you know.
No, I
There's
understand.
a variance for lot depth, but you consider to get to that lot depth, of course, you evaluate the depths of the other lots, and it's obviously consistent.
The 2 and 2.
It's consistent with the depths of the lots that are on one side, which are shorter.
It's just that the minimum lot depth doesn't apply unless you subdivide the lot.
But it is it is a defining character of some of those lots on the north, that the lot depths are shorter.
Well, you can see that on the first page of
Yeah.
01.
Right.
I guess I'm curious by what you mean by apply, right? Like, how would you apply that to a pre-existing structure?
Yeah.
Are you forcing them to knock it down?
That's a better question
You don't
than mine.
apply it to existing lots, period. The only time when a lot depth standard kicks in is when you're subdividing a lot. Otherwise, you don't have a lot depth standard in the R1 zone.
Right, understood, because applying it would mean saying that house is illegal and functionally moving it or knocking it down, right?
Well, the implication is when you subdivide, you're going to probably put in a new house, and the town wants that new house to fit in.
Of course, I'm asking about the pre-existing lots that you said are not non-complying, that it doesn't apply to them, right? But we need to understand what applying means with how you're using it.
The applicant testified that there are 4 non-conforming lots in the block in terms of depth. In my opinion, there are 0 non-conforming lots in the block today. By the applicant's subdivision, they're creating a non-conforming lot depth.
Understood. So would you say that, I guess to rephrase it slightly, should those properties be built today, they would be non-conforming, but because they are already there, they are conforming?
They're conforming because your ordinance standard only applies. You have no ordinance standard until someone comes in and subdivides the lot. Then you have a lot depth standard.
They're not non-conforming, is the point.
So-
They're not,
Yeah,
they're,
no,
they're a legal
They're
nullity because we don't care.
I understand that. I'm trying to elucidate that
conforming
that they float in this netherworld of zoning.
Mr. Steck, can you just go over
My
which
bingo card
section
for
of
the
the
evening,
code
but thank you.
you're quoting? I just want to make sure I understand what you're citing. Can you cite the section?
Yeah, I wrote down the section. It's, okay. 347-18, the title is Formation of New Lots.
Okay.
And then subsection E1 says depth of newly created lots.
That's 347.
-18,
18E.
capital E, 1 in parentheses.
So that says the minimum lot sizes in the RO, ROA, R1, and R2 zones shall conform to the minimum lot sizes and areas prescribed in this chapter, or if there is no such zoning requirement for the district in which such lots are located, the width of such proposed lots or lots shall conform to the width set forth in the zoning map. The depth of such proposed lot or lots shall conform to the following requirements. So I'm not quite sure how you read.
And you go to E1, and again, the standard is where you're not doing an interior subdivision like a new cul-de-sac. That's when
I think you're cutting, yeah, it says, where the existing street pattern has been established and there is no opportunity for interior block subdivision, the depth of all newly created lots shall be in keeping with the established lot depth.
That's right, newly created lots. So these are not newly created lots.
And then it says, where the existing street pattern has not been established and where a subdivision will involve a new street that has a separate lot width requirement.
So that's for new streets we're talking about. For
Correct,
established street patterns, it's a little bit different. Okay. I had another question. You mentioned we have to balance benefits and detriments. Two questions. The first one, I'm not sure that there's any purview of this board with respect to the wildlife designation, the national wildlife designation. Does statutorily, do we have any,
I think so.
does that mean anything? Can we consider that?
In my opinion, it doesn't mean anything. The owner may have gotten their lot certified, as a nice place for birds to hang out, but it's not a law.
Okay. And then I guess the second question I have in terms of detriment, I'm the liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission. A lot of what we talk about is the historic elements, one of those being the view shed, which is the original layout of a historic asset. This will clearly change that.
One of the municipal land use law purposes is to encourage aesthetics, to promote aesthetics. And while this is not in a historic district, I think the Historic Commission really addressed that theme of aesthetics. This is a historic building, historic site by its very character.
But Janice, can you remind us why it came before the HPC?
Because any
Your microphone, Janice.
Any application to the planning board or zoning board that includes a potentially historic site identified in our master plan must be referred to the HPC for comment.
And this
only.
was deemed a potentially historic site.
Right.
Correct. So I think that for me is still remains one of the most compelling reasons to protect this site is the historic nature of this home, which we've talked about. I'm sure everyone's heard me go through Mr. Tinkham and Paul Volcker and the other, the tea gardens open to the public and its relationship to Applegate Farms. And that to me would be one of the most compelling reasons to deny and consider the detriments to the neighborhood.
Yeah, I look at it from the point of view of aesthetics as viewed from the municipal land use law. It's not in a historic district, but I think if you take the recommendations of the Historic Commission as being aesthetic recommendations, they make sense with respect to this application.
And the more we alter this site, the more we lose the historic resources of the wall and other, elements, structures on this site. They're gone forever.
Well, that's correct. They'll be changed significantly. And again, I think the tea garden is significant because you can see it. It's probably 20 feet back.
Well, fortunately, they've agreed to maintain
Yeah.
that, and I appreciate that aspect of the plan. But I do have a concern about changing the overall site itself. You can't get that view shed back unless, you demo the house, but that's not going to happen. All right, thank you. Those are my questions.
I have a question. Where in the MLUL is aesthetics to be considered by the board?
It's one of the purposes of the municipal land use law. I believe it's purpose I, NJSA 4055D-
To promote a desirable
visual environment.
Is that the one you're?
Yes.
Yeah. To promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement? Is that the section you're relying on?
Any further questions from the board? Counselor? Do you have further questions for Mr. Steck?
No, just to kind of recap, so Mr. Steck had testified as to the requirements for the granting of a C1 or C2 variance where the applicant bears the burden of proof. Based on Mr. Steck's testimony, it's our position that the applicant has not carried that burden, and this application should be denied.
Mr. Chairman, we have no questions of Mr. Steck, and we would forego our opportunity to redirect. So we're, in the interest of time, happy to move along.
Yeah. Now, does public have any questions of Mr. Steck?
Just occurred to me, I don't know if y'all know this answer, but I would like you to hold this question. It's Margot Walter again. If this variance is approved, will there be a net increase, decrease, or will the property taxes collected by the town, how will they be impacted? Will they remain the same? Will there be an increase in property taxes collected?
That's not really a question for this board.
Pardon?
I said, that's not really a question for this board.
Yeah.
Logically
Okay.
speaking, if there's an additional home, then there may be an additional tax revenue to the town, but that's not something this board considers.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Emma Jane Coombs again. Yeah, I guess I'm just following on from the sort of slippery slope comment from earlier.
What's the question?
Sorry?
Is this a question or a
You're
statement?
just supposed to be asking me questions of what I talked about. So, sorry.
Hold that thought. Are there any questions of Mr. Steck from the public? Okay, looks like we're done. Thank you, Mr. Steck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. All right, now, come on back. Sorry about the back and forth.
No. So you can tell I've done loads of these before. Yeah, just following on from the Emma Jane Coombs again, slippery slope comment from another neighbour earlier. I know it's an entirely different project, but the Woodman Field development, with regards to the trees, they said they'd take 13 down, 21 came down. I know it's an entirely different project, but with relation to this particular project, they're saying 21 trees are going to come down. I just have a huge concern. It's almost inevitably going to be more than that. And even if they don't take them down, I've seen in other developments around the area the damage done to trees, tree roots from all. There's some magnificent heritage oaks and in the garden. I personally, I have big concerns about that. And I know, yes, that there's aspects around obviously character. I walk past there twice a day, walking my dog, etc. But I think that the other issue is heat, and I don't think that, I'm not sure if that's really been referenced before. The more and more of these large trees that we take down, obviously the shade goes for our community. And you've got Woodman, then you might have this. Then it happens to another property and another property, maybe down Park Street alone. But you take away that shade, and I know we all talk about, global warming, etc. But I feel we've got to really look at this in terms of how our communities and neighbourhoods are moving forward. If we're continually allowing these developments, where particularly in Montclair, these older trees are being taken down, and hard buildings are being put in their place. I feel for the neighbour to the south of the development here. There's going to be a lot of residual heat created by this project, not just for the immediate neighbours, but for all of us in the area who enjoy, walking around. And I just think that maybe we need to be thinking about this a little more seriously, because obviously also related to that point, we have a tree ordinance in place, obviously in the town. It's not actually very strong. So you can say you can take down 21 trees and comply with the tree ordinance. I do believe currently you can get away, you can take down 21 oaks and replace that with 21 arborvitae, which creates a screen less than 30 feet long, and that's technically what the tree ordinance currently allows. Or maybe you can't even do that and just pay $250 and obviously per tree that you take down. And my concern is this wonderful asset that we have now on this street the wildlife, the cooling effect on the neighborhood. It's going to go, and it won't be replaced. Thanks.
Evan Cutler again. I just wanted to, I don't know how to put this in without sounding just like angry, but when the developer said that, you know, I did one on Woodmont Road, I did one on North Mountain Road, I did one on Christopher Street, I did one on Chestnut Street. To me, it sounds like someone who is like selling, like short selling stocks. To me, like, this is our neighborhood. This is something that has meant so much to the people who live here for hundreds of years. Like we have neighbors who, you know, whose grandparents grew up here. And the reason we chose the actual house we live on is when first time we came here 20 years ago to look at houses, we took a right turn at the cemetery, made a left turn on Park, and house after house, and I saw the character of this strip that you go from Alexander all the way to the house that we bought by next to Pillsbury School, and it just struck me as this is a really unique thing that you don't really see anywhere else in town. To the point now, whenever we have visitors come, I always say, when you get off the Route 3, when you get to Mount Heber, make a right and then make a left on Park, just because I'm so like proud of the way this strip looks on Park Street. To have that, like, for people to see when they come to our town, to me, I can't imagine a more beautiful showcase than this. You know, like literally from Alexander all the way to, I guess, all the way to Haddon. There's house and then there's room between each house. I mean, it's like a nonstop gallery of beauty. To all of a sudden cram these three houses all of a sudden together is going to completely destroy this like visual element. And to me, you know, it's one thing you could be making money on doing anything. You could, like, my son makes money like on fantasy football. I mean, like, you literally just picked a town an hour away from you that you're not even here enough to know when the windows are open or shut. And you've decided that, okay, this is how I'm going to make some money. To me, it's like, okay, yes, we're all entitled to make money and choose however we want to make money. But to me, this is like, it just seems very arbitrary and like, you're not going to be living here. We live here, and this is going to affect us and our children and the house that we're going to give to our kids, and hopefully that our kids will end up living in our houses. I mean, they are living in our houses now, you know, after we leave. But to me, it's like, it just seems like, again, I'm not in the real estate business, so for me, it's like, okay, this is what you guys do for a living. But to me, it's so like arbitrary that you just chose, okay, you're like literally, you may as well just be playing the stock market. It's just like, you just chose this town and like, let's see how I could flip houses or whatever you're doing. And, you know, it doesn't matter to you, but it does matter to us. So in all respect, I understand you're just trying to make a living, but, you know, this is going to affect us for like, you know, forever. Thank you.
Patrick Wilson again. I do want to thank you guys for your patience. It really does mean a lot for those of us who come out and support our area. And the reason I'm following Evan is because I not only do I feel the same way, but I'm sitting here listening to like, what are the benefits, what are the detriments? Like we're trying to weigh, well, could it be good? The answer is no, right? I mean, let's be very honest. Just like he said, it's for money. They're looking at their phone. It's okay. It's just for money. And we all do things for money sometimes. I work in Hollywood. Trust me, I get it. But my point is, you've got a whole group of people that so many things we feel so passionate about, that we stumble, that we try to figure out because it's a feeling, right? We move into a neighborhood. You moved into your house because of a feeling. I moved to my house not because of what it looked like outside, because I walked out in the backyard and I said, oh my God, this beautiful big backyard. Fantastic. This changes the entire dynamic of, I know you've heard this a lot, but the entire dynamic of this area for those of us that will stare at it all day long, right? I live right across the street, well, diagonal.
So when you talk about detriment, there's not a world where a house is created where you go down the line and you go, you know what, I am so glad they built that there. It looks great. Like, let's be very clear, that will never happen. You'll sell it for, I don't know, maybe 1.5, 1.6 or something, and all the other houses that have now, according to Zillow, again, not a realtor, but I look at it a lot, that have gone up in property, I really do wonder if the other houses go down, because now you've got these other properties that have been built up over the years with their property and all the work that we've done to that area of the town. And then you're going to have a much smaller house on a much thinner property. And I don't believe that it's going to increase the value. I think it's going to decrease the value, certainly of Eileen's house, sadly, and all the work that she's done, because she's going to have a neighbor right there versus having the beautiful trees that we've all discussed. I think visually is a very, very, very big thing. And I know we're not in the business of feelings. I get that, because you guys have done a great job with your ordinances, and I know that. I don't think you're lying about anything. But we make decisions about where we live because of the feeling. And this will absolutely change the feeling of that street. Absolutely. There's not a world where it doesn't, where it makes anyone feel better that there's a house, except for the people that move there and will be very nice to the new neighbors if this happens. Obviously, none of us want that to happen. And I implore you to think about the slippery slope, think about the subdivisions, and where this goes. Does that mean every property that's going to be, maybe not to the ordinance, but you could fit 2 houses there? When does that happen? When does that happen in North Mountain? When does that happen in Upper Mountain? All those things. But I do think this is a slippery slope, because this house in this area defines our end of the street. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate your patience for letting us all just get our heart out. But it's something that means a ton of us, as I'm sure the houses that surround you guys feel the same way. Thanks a lot.
Shannon Swinski, again, 533 Park. First thing, I want to thank all of you for dealing with the passionate members of the neighborhood who are here and who have lots of questions and perhaps not as fine-tuned on our protocol. But one of the things that it struck me, we live in a certain area of town, but this is applicable to this entire town. You have a responsibility to this entire town. There are historic buildings, there are large lots that could be subdivided. And we've used slippery slope, or we'll use precedent, or maybe it's not a precedent, each thing is taken on its own merits. But one of the things that I think we need to consider is, how are we stewards for this town? And how are we stewards for how and what happens, what gets built, what gets relocated? We talked about Woodman Field, we talked about some of the other locations, but this is applicable in every ward, in every street, in every element of this township. So I implore you to think about that. You've got a group of neighbors, and some people may say, this is very specific to this one neighborhood, but it's not. Everyone who lives in Montclair is passionate about this town and about where we live, and so coming from people who are in town and other things, the historic elements that make us so unique and how we are and what we do, I think as you're making your deliberations, that has to be part of, there's the technical, which we don't think that they've proven, but then there's the practical and how it applies in the bigger picture as you are tasked with doing your jobs going forward. So, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Counselor.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further witnesses. We've heard from the public. Just a few brief moments to sum up, if you would be so kind.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I thank you for your time, and I would just like to make a brief closing argument in support of the application. I do not envy your job tonight, but I do appreciate your time. Again, the present application proposes the subdivision of an existing oversized single lot located at 509 Park Street, also known as Block 2710, Lot 29 on the tax maps of the Township of Montclair. Should the subdivision be approved, the existing lot would be subdivided now into only 2 lots, with the existing single-family dwelling to remain and a new single-family dwelling to be constructed on the right facing the existing dwelling from Park Street. During the course of this application, we've heard concerns raised by members of the planning board, members of the public as well. Specifically, we've heard some concerns regarding possible demolition by neglect on the part of the property owner and applicant, possibly leaving doors and windows open at the property, etc. We've heard from our property owner, these allegations are simply not true. If any doors or windows have been left open, it's been done by the contractors working at the site unintentionally. The applicant will certainly continue to stay on top of the people working at the property to make sure that is not the case. Frankly, it doesn't make any sense from a financial perspective for my client to be doing that. So I don't know where those concerns have arisen from. If they are in fact true, we will do our best to make sure they do not continue. The destruction of the fieldstone wall, rubble stone wall in front of the property. I note this was not identified as a historic element by the Historic Preservation Commission's consulting engineer. Despite that, we have done our best to preserve that front wall. The applicant has made a point to only disturb the minimum amount required to permit a driveway to access the new single-family dwelling proposed. And obviously, we've eliminated the second lot. That's eliminated the second cut of that front wall. So we're preserving that wall to the best of our ability. With regard to the number of trees that will necessarily be taken down to permit the proposed construction of the new single-family dwelling, after the last meeting, we had Mike Pietry's team get out to the site and take the specific counts of the trees that will be affected. We've heard that testimony here tonight. 21 trees is a lot of trees. We understand that. But unfortunately, if we're going to construct a single-family dwelling in that property, some trees are going to have to come down. Obviously, the applicant can do their best to minimize the amount of trees that are disturbed. We'll work with the township to replace all trees, as many trees as possible on site, and we'll certainly comply with the tree removal ordinance fully. Lastly, with regard to the possible impact of the new single-family dwelling on stormwater patterns, we have an extensive discussion with regard to those stormwater designs that are going to be proposed. And our testimony here tonight is that the stormwater will be better, if not the same as it exists right now, and certainly Montclair's engineers will make sure that that is the case. With regard to some potential conditions that we've discussed, in particular, one condition that I've heard mentioned several times during the course of these proceedings is that the historic elements identified by the Montclair Historical Preservation Commission be preserved in perpetuity. I'd like to just state that the fact that this board is concerned about preserving the historical elements of the subject property, we agree. We absolutely agree. We'd like to preserve them as well. The best way to accomplish this, however, would be to approve the subdivision application and condition the application on the complete and perpetual preservation of those historic elements as identified by the Historic Preservation Commission. In addition, and along the same lines, another condition which was discussed during the course of the meeting, that no further subdivision of the lots be provided. The applicant would certainly agree to that condition. So those are two conditions that I think would be important to the board, important to the public, and the applicant would certainly agree to both of those conditions in addition to any other conditions that this board would see fit in order to approve this application. Despite the concerns which have been put forth, we still believe that the proposed subdivision and the development plan presented represents the best opportunity to preserve the existing historic single-family dwelling on the property, to preserve the historic elements that exist on that property today, and to provide additional quality housing opportunities in one of the most desirable sections in Montclair going forward. On the basis of the testimony and the evidence presented before this board at these hearings, I would ask that the board approve of the present application, and I again thank the board for its time and consideration.
All right, thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the hearing portion is over, and now it's time to figure out what the board wants to do. Who wants to be heard?
Chairman, I'd like to start. I have said at several past meetings that I'm not against subdivision as a rule, but I did not feel that this site is appropriate for subdivision, and I continue to feel that way. I think, as we've discussed at previous meetings, this home has more historic value than your generic run-of-the-mill subdivision. We've talked about Mr. Tinkham, his connection to the development of Applegate Farms. We've talked about Paul Volker and other prominent members of the Montclair community living there. I think we've talked about, as Mr. Wilson pointed out, this is a defining property, a defining home on that street. I respect the commitment to protect the historic elements on the site, but changing the character of this site with a new home, with a new driveway, altering the historic assets will create changes that we cannot replicate, that we can't go back from. And I know I talk a lot about the view shed. I mentioned it several times. Once you change the layout of this home, this historic property, we cannot get it back. So I would be against subdivision for this specific property for those reasons.
One question regarding the historic assets there. If this application's denied, can the owner just take them down?
No, they would have to come before the HPC to demolish any of those assets.
Only if more than 49%
Right.
of them would be demolished. So that's incorrect.
The definition of demolition is total demolition, has to be more than 50%.
What about partial demolition?
That is not, HPC has no say over partial demolition of a non-historic property.
What about one that's a potential historic property?
It doesn't, it's only if it's surveyed. It was surveyed, it's got to be more than 50%.
And does that mean 50% of the total assets on the property or 50%
Each
of
structure.
any individual asset?
You're correct, it's 50%. Usually it's defined as a wall.
Yeah.
50% of a wall.
Okay.
So, but again, you could assume it's 50% of the structure. So if it's less than 50%, then there's no HPC involvement.
So same goes for like the garden, they could lop off 49%.
49% of it.
Okay.
Can you do that again? Like, can you lop off? I just want to play this out because I'm.
We've had these discussions on the HPC. Janice, do you want to, I mean.
I'm making you lop off 49%,
Yeah.
wait a year and lop off the next 49% of
The
that?
ordinance, I believe.
It's not that scientific, so.
But the change, Janice, doesn't it require 5 years before you can lop off
I
another?
don't believe there's I'd have to double check.
Didn't we
to see if
change the
there's a-
ordinance recently? If I'm not mistaken, we sent
I
it to the
don't believe
council.
that was in there, but I'll have to double check. I'm not
Okay.
that familiar with the particulars of this section of the
Okay.
ordinance, but I could look into that.
I'm just curious.
I'm very sympathetic to the concerns of changes in the neighborhood. I'm also very sympathetic to the idea that each and every place we live was a change to the neighborhood that existed before it. We're all new here. Some of us a little more new than others, but we're all new here. And having a little understanding that part of what got us here is the centuries of change that have come before us is, I think, important to keep in mind.
So, friends, I've been on this board now for, I guess, about 2 years. I've been here through some interesting applications. I've been here through some really big applications like Lackawanna. And when Lackawanna came here, we had a number of neighbors come in and explain how the building of a project of that size was going to really dramatically change where they lived and how they lived. And the board heard that, and we did our best to cause the council to make changes to what they did so as to not really dramatically affect the lives of the people that were living around there. And they listened to some things, they didn't listen to most, and it is what it is. I came here with a very open mind. I wanted to hear what everybody had to say, and I was trying to ask questions about, you know, what are we really talking about here? And I think that through the discussion, you spoke very passionately about what it is that concerns you if this happens. And there was a lot of drainage, and there was a lot of trees, and there's some of what I see when I look out my window and what I see when I drive down my street is going to change if this happens. And I hear you, and I'm not unsympathetic to it, but I didn't hear enough tonight to have me say, now I always defer to my friend on historical elements because it's what he does, and he's been doing it for years.
I got the ordinance wrong, though, but.
Yeah, well, yeah, you did, but your viewpoint about the historic preservation in the town is something that we can't do without on this board, and it's what's pulling me in the other direction. But based on what I heard and based on the very passionate statements tonight, I kind of come out where Jacob is, which is that it's a change, but it's a change that I don't see a reason to say no. But I'm still open-minded, but I disagree with you more often than not, but I had a feeling I knew where you were tonight and I wanted to hear it. So that's kind of where I am, but I'm still open to persuasion.
I haven't heard anything from you, Chairman.
He wraps it up. Well, I guess I used to live on Elston Road, so I know the neighborhood well. And I agree wholeheartedly with Mike's sense of the beauty of walking down the street and seeing one lovely house after another, then seeing this bigger property with a lovely house on it. I don't know where that house is going, but hopefully it'll still be a lovely house. I feel like if you subdivide it, you're like chopping off somebody's right arm and leaving the balance there, and it just aesthetically, to me, it will hurt the look of the neighborhood, and that matters. I mean, we like beauty in our lives. Is that what we're legislating here? I don't know. I don't think there's any, what's the upside? The applicant makes money on this, and it changes the neighborhood. Why do we care about that? Are we supporting him making money on this? I can't do that. I prefer to see that.
And a couple more people get to live in our town, and.
Well, that's.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Well, I disagree. That's, a couple more people. Where were people talking about, as you talked about Lackawanna? There were many more people that were. Yeah. Anyway, I can see Mr. Steck's point of view and can support his argument. So I would not be in favor of this subdivision.
No, if you don't, then.
I'm on the middle. Is the house not designated as historic? No. Okay.
Potential.
So, as I'm looking at this plan, I was like, that's strange.
Sorry. Why should everybody that comes in and wants to subdivide the properties and make them smaller, why would we support that? Why don't we like that? I mean, the look of Montclair matters to me.
That's why we have zoning.
Yeah, but we can see there's like,
Requirements to
you're not supposed to be arguing this, dear, right?
No, we should spend a lot of time working on our zoning ordinances to encourage the kind of development we want to see.
And I don't think this is what we want to see.
The fact of the matter is that we've looked at the properties in town several times over the past decade. And there's really a limited number of properties that can be successfully subdivided and still come within the basic majority of the requirements of our zoning law, and maybe only require a slight variance here or a slight variance there. We're really built out here. And you know how we got built out? We got built out by people coming in here to the town and looking at larger properties and saying, you know what, I think I can build so-and-so, so let me buy this property. We've seen across the town in the past 4 years or so, a staggering number of developers come in and redevelop houses and put them for sale. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because we've had a lot of improved properties as a result of that. In looking at this particular type of application, which we have seen several times over the time that I've been on the planning board, one of the, overriding considerations has been how it's going to affect the neighborhood, and is the construction of what's placed, what's proposed to be placed. If it gets built, and somebody were to ride down the street 5 years after, would they be able to tell that this was an addition into the block? Or would it blend in? And I think, by and large, the decisions that we've made over the years have been pretty successful with that, and that a stranger would be hard-pressed. Of course, the neighbors know, but a stranger would be hard-pressed to tell that a house was put here that was used to be a vacant lot. I mean, it's happened across the street from me. It's happened around the corner from me. It's happened on a number of properties. There's been properties that I've disagreed with, like the Marlboro Inn. But I tell you, you ride past where the Marlboro Inn used to be. Does anybody remember what it looked like?
Yes.
Right. And what's there now? And what's there now? You remember that there was a big open space, and now there's basically large houses and trees. Now, I did not agree with that kind of development, but it's there, and a stranger coming into town may not really be able to tell that that's something because of the way that they've camouflaged it, okay? Once you get on the street, you realize it's a little different than most streets in town. But riding past it, because of the way that it's camouflaged, that's the only saving grace about that development. And that, to me, was not one of the better ones, but, you know, it is what it is. I look at a number of other ones that we've looked at and that we have approved, and I think we've been successful with those. I've looked at, and there's been a number of ones that we've heard that we have denied because we didn't feel that it was going to blend into the neighborhood. Now, when I look at this neighborhood, I'm looking at the size of the lots, I'm looking at the streetscape, I'm looking at how the houses are lined up as you're walking by them. To me, this is a transitional lot because on this side of the street, and it changes to the north, it's larger lots, to the south, it's smaller lots. You go across the street, it's the mirror image. It's the north side of the street that has the narrower lots, and the south side of the street that has the larger lots, okay? But in any case, there is a mixture of lot sizes and houses in this neighborhood. It's not just this side of the street, it's both sides of the street. You can't go past one side of the street without seeing the other side of the street as you're coming down Park, either direction. And I think when the applicant was trying to put 3 houses, make one house, one lot into 3 lots, I think that was overkill. I don't have that same view with the way that they are proposing this application, if they're willing to commit to the size of the house and the overall design of the house, and the placement of the house. As to the trees, I informally counted based on the pictures that were submitted by the various witnesses. My estimate is that, yeah, they're gonna lose approximately 1/3 of the trees on the property. There's still gonna be 2/3 on the property. A good 30, almost 40 trees are gonna remain on the property. It's not like they're wiping it out. There needs to be some replacement. Maybe we can have some requirements so that it's not just arborvitae that's put in as replacements, so that there are some shade trees that are replanted to repopulate. But I think the proposal as it's submitted, I think it works in terms of the streetscape, in terms of how coming down the street, it will blend in. And the design of the house, I think, incorporates a blend of the traditional, and the architecture on the street is a blend. It's not all Tudors, and it's not all mid-century. It's a combination of things, and I think this type of house will fit in and will create the type of streetscape that exists on many of the streets in Montclair currently. And so for all of those reasons, you know, I don't see a reason not to approve, with some qualifications and with some conditions on it. But I don't see a reason not to approve the application as it's been revised and submitted.
Can I just say also, I feel like, you know, we're in kind of almost like a nebulous area. We are supposed to uphold the laws, the ordinance of the housing ordinances here in town, but we also, I believe, represent the people here. I know you disagree with me there.
It's not nebulous.
I know you did. We have 25 families or whatever that came out that live in this neighborhood, and then we have one developer. And the 25 families are saying this is wrong for our neighborhood, and I cannot support the developer. 25 families live there. They're there every day. Their children are there every day. They look at they see the way the neighborhood looks, the feel of the neighborhood. They're a connected community here. And this is what they want. They do not want this.
I agree.
When you
You're absolutely right.
And what is, I mean, the thing that's happening is you have this applicant making money on this. He's not going to live there.
But that's not
He's
a reason to deny an application under the law. You have
I
to
know,
remember-
but we're
you have to
subjective. There's
remember
subjective
what
reasons
we
as well.
What our purpose is
Yes,
here. And we have to uphold the municipal land use law, and the municipal land use law does not account for the feel of the neighborhood and whether the neighbors want something. I understand.
listen to neighbors, yeah.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's not that we ignore neighbors. We repeatedly and consistently take those things into account.
but
because somebody's going to make money on a project is not a reason to deny it. Otherwise, we would never approve any development.
I agree. All I'm saying is that the person who's applying for this variance, he's not going to live here. He's buying this thing. He took a risk when he bought this property. His intent was to maximize the use of the property with 2 other houses, as well as, doing whatever he's doing on the main property. And, he's throwing the dice here. And
But that's not a ground to deny an application.
Well, I think we've heard, it's not like some of the applications we hear, it seems like, oh, you could not possibly go one way or the other. We're very unanimous. This is kind of, I think there's ambiguity among the group here. So I'm trying to convince people that.
We do have different opinions, and I understand, but at the end of the day, we do have legal requirements that we have to adhere to.
But nothing I'm saying is like denying the legal requirements.
We'll talk after.
Yeah. I mean, we have a master plan that speaks to the character of the neighborhood, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand. That I understand, and I understand we have a disagreement as to whether that character is going to be impacted or not. But any change in town is always going to impact the character.
I'm saying negatively impact.
I think this application provides a really interesting opportunity to look at the interplay of our zoning regulations and our historical preservation regulations. And I think our zoning regulations do an admirable job of trying to account for the fact that so much of Montclair's development happened in an environment before zoning and in the earliest days of zoning, when it was a lot less robust and a lot less specific in what it says. I think looking at this in the broader context, connecting it to the Applegate property on just that parcel, you've got a house that doesn't conform with is a pre-existing home that would not conform to the zoning should it have been built on this lot as is, a pre-existing non-conforming use or depth ratio. You've got a whole development in the back of it in the Fairview area that is on much smaller lots than much of the area surrounding it. You've got a lot of the properties on the street next to it that have lot depths or frontages that are not in line with what would be required by our zoning. That's not to suggest the zoning is wrong or that the historical preservation is wrong or anything like that, but it goes to show that our community did not develop under these strict rules of conformity that we see in places like Christopher Court, right? Where there are hard and fast lines and rules and each property conforms to exactly as much as it should. And I think that's something to keep in mind when considering applications like this. The historic home itself doesn't comply with the laws designed to kind of protect the historic home.
Right, well, I'm going to make a motion to approve the application with conditions. And Art, if you'll help me out here.
I'd be glad to, but I think I'm going to need Mr. Piramali's help.
Oh, your
Absolutely.
So let me tell you how I view There are at least 3 conditions that I'm aware of. The historic elements to be preserved perpetually. What do you mean by that? What is it that the applicant is going to agree to?
So currently, the design of the dwellings, where they're located, where the new dwellings can be located, does just that. It does preserve that tea garden in front. Now, that handout that I'd handed out that we identified as A11, I believe, that's a markup that was done by the Historic Preservation Commission's architect, Connell and Foley, I think is the firm?
Yes, our consultant.
Consulting architect. And what he did was he bubbled the areas that are
A12.
considered, A12, my apologies, that are considered historic elements that require preservation, such that if we were to demolish any more than 50% of it, that would require a demolition permit from the HPC. We, in fact, did better than that. We decided not to impact any of them. And in fact, we would agree to preserve those in perpetuity.
So on A12, there are 2 areas with blue surround, I guess that would,
Yes.
bubbles.
Like a cloud.
That's clouded.
Clouds, bubbles. So there are 2, and when you said earlier that the historic elements, everything within these 2 bubbles that is historically related to the HPC's report will be preserved perpetually.
That is correct.
Is that your?
That is
I would suggest that we add to that the stone wall along the front of the, because that's not bubbled on there.
absolutely acceptable to the applicant.
I understand it's in the right of way, but I think that should be.
Ms. Talley, I
included
appreciate your clarification,
So
absolutely.
the stone wall, with the exception
Of where the driveway.
Of the
where the
section
driveway
that the driveway will be.
Well, Mr. Neiman suggested maintaining those stones in a different layout. If this were to pass, I would hope that they would protect.
We have no problem with that. The applicant has no problem attempting to relocate those sections that have been removed to a right angle against the driveway.
going in.
Correct, going
into
in.
the property, is that the understanding?
Correct.
Okay. You also made a statement, a representation, that there would be no further subdivision. You want to explain what you meant by that?
Correct. So the applicant would agree that if this application were approved, that there would be no further subdivision of the, obviously, the concern of the board and the concern of the public is that there's a potential for a subdivision to the north. Let's say that this board chooses to approve the application presently before it with the subdivided lot to the south. What's to stop the applicant from then coming back in and trying to subdivide 2-lot subdivision to the north with the existing 29.01? The applicant would agree that they would not seek that and would restrict the property against subdivision going forward in the future. If that-
29.01
Right,
lot.
correct. And
So
if
that would
were-
be a deed
If that
restriction?
would require a deed restriction, the applicant would agree to a deed restriction.
I
of
think
course.
it would require a
Of course.
deed restriction.
I agree
So-
with you, Mr. Neese.
So, so we've got that out there. And
Would
then-
the preservation of the historic structures also be on the deed restriction? Would that?
I don't see how that's harmful. If we're going to do a deed with the deed restriction for the no subdivision, I have no problem adding the historical elements.
Good point.
And preserved, does that also include maintain? You know, so again, to avoid this demolition by neglect? like
Let's
if-
say preserve and maintain. I like that.
Thank you.
And then the last condition that I have is the shade trees to be repopulated. And I think, Chair Nguyen, I think that came from you, and could I just get some idea of what it is that you meant by that?
Well, not wanting trees that will grow to produce
Right.
shade, produce a canopy, as opposed to just grow vertically.
So my
and to
suggestion
be-
is, submit a tree replacement plan
Yeah.
with the.
Subject to the review and
Right.
approval of the board.
With trees that are native to New Jersey,
Right.
and they must be trees.
Well, that's in the plan already. The shade tree plan already has that.
And would you like a variety of evergreen and deciduous trees? I mean, we've seen that before, where there's a variety of evergreen and deciduous trees.
Right, and, they can, however they can populate it
Right.
to get the maximum amount.
And I think there's a list of suggested trees on our website, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken.
So that it doesn't become totally bare during the winter.
So,
Totally treed, I guess, too. You might like some lawn there.
so in terms of the plan,
And just so that, and the advantage of having this as a condition of approval, it means that the trees will actually be shown on the plot plan.
that was my
Which,
point.
absent, that's not a requirement that's in our tree replacement ordinance. So when they come in with their plot plan, that's when we would get the tree replacement planting.
And the attempt is to put as many trees back on the property, maybe either property?
Well,
At the time, we own both. I don't know that that'll be the case going forward, so
What is
I'll
your-
leave that up to the board, but.
What is your preference? Do you want to put it on the property where the, I mean, the trees are coming down on the subject, on the new.
That's the preference, I think, is to replace on the,
Yeah.
Yeah,
on the
that-
subject
That's what I
property.
That would be,
but-
we would
But if you
appreciate
can
that as
add to
well.
the other side
Correct.
of the
I-
grove that sits on the border, I mean, you don't necessarily want to obstruct the house, but there's that group of trees that's on the north side of the property. You could add to that somewhat, add a few trees in there, yeah.
That's
Keith, is
acceptable
that
to the
something-
applicant.
Is that something the Environmental Commission would like to review?
I'm sure the tree subcommittee would love that.
See, that's an
we
idea.
do.
Why don't we have that?
perfect. And they're actually looking at rewriting the ordinance anyways.
sure.
You know, that's come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what the since we're talking about it, what the situation of the shade tree along that streetscape is, but maybe,
Well,
they've been
the-
adding trees.
The township just got
Are
a
they?
huge
They're adding
grant.
trees. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know
And
they.
that's,
But they'll take care of adding some trees in there,
Yeah,
even
I
though they
think-
weren't.
I think that the tree replacement plan should focus on, well, there might be one, on the trees on the property.
itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to come back before the revisions subcommittee?
Oh, I don't think so. If it's a subdivision plan, I don't think it needs to go to the revisions committee.
No, I'm talking with regard to the tree replacement aspect of
No,
it.
I think it should go to the Environmental Commission. They
You
have a
wanna-
tree group.
You want to refer to the tree group?
If you have tree experts, if you have a tree subcommittee.
The tree subcommittee.
Tree subcommittee and the Environmental Commission would make sense,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so.
Tree group.
And all of our engineering requirements are being satisfied
Do you have
As a
any,
condition of approval.
as a
Yeah.
condition.
Stormwater, everything.
was there anything in the report that,
I think there's one shed, sorry. There's one shed on the property line. What's the disposition of that?
To shed on the property line, the existing detached garage that was denied demolition by the Historic Preservation Commission?
No, I thought on the neighbors. Oh, you'll take care of it. Okay. That's good. Other than that, compliance with our report and especially stormwater and grading.
understood?
And you know what needs to come back before the house? The materials and stuff on the house?
Well, it's a single-family house.
Yeah, I don't know that we have that
Yeah.
No, we
jurisdiction.
can't. Okay. They've just got to conform to the design.
Does the Historic Preservation Commission weigh in on that?
No.
It's not
So it could be
historical.
one of those white houses with black windows like they're building all over town?
Yeah, it's a single-family house, yeah. It's not in a historic district. That's,
But it doesn't have to conform to what they've represented here?
it has to, but it doesn't say colors.
I see.
You know, we don't, in fact, the HPC doesn't oversee colors, so,
Yeah, I don't know
But-
what the
Yeah,
design
we
of the
can't
house
really
would
do
look
that.
like.
Is it going to approximate, will the house approximate that which this board has
Well, they want
seen
people
on
to
Mr. Pietry's?
It will.
yeah, good.
And is that, and forgive me, I don't recall, was that a sketch or was that part of the packet that we received?
It was.
Okay.
And it has been changed since the last meeting of the board. So it's revised and with the new package of materials that was submitted for this particular hearing.
Okay. As long as it's part of the packet,
It is.
then we're going to hold, because my resolution is going to say that if the board approves it.
It is part of the package.
Going to say that you're going to comply fully with exactly as shown.
Okay. All right.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
think that's it. That's the motion. Do we have a second?
I think,
Who- Mr. Jacobson's second?
no, Kevin.
Kevin. Kevin, you're second, okay. I guess I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Brodock,
With all those conditions, yes.
Mr. Graham,
No.
Ms. Lockman,
No.
Mr. Pierre,
Yes.
Ms. Willis.
It's been a hard decision. Because it's been a hard decision because I felt that I didn't hear a really strong reason why this was necessary. But with the conditions and the amount of compromise that has been achieved, I think I will support it. So I will say yes.
Chair Wynn,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
And Mr. Neiman.
Yes.
I thank the board very much for its time and hard work on this application. Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a great holiday.
You too. All right, so we have an executive session.
Do we need to go into an executive session?
I can simply report that there's no decision made by anybody, but if you want to go into executive session to discuss the pending litigation, that's the way to do it.
Do we need to go in executive session? No decision.
Well, I can report a conversation, that's
Well, that
about
was,
it.
well, we can talk about, you want to talk about staff?
I thought that was on the agenda, that there was our appointments for next year.
Okay, I don't expect, regarding personnel, I'm going to get calls packages. I had to go to issue an RFQ for all positions. And I won't get those back until December 28th. So we can talk about how you feel tonight, but I won't be able to report back to you on who submitted until the January meeting.
When's the first?
We want
will have
that.
to carry over our contracts until a new experts are appointed.
So Janice, would we discuss them in executive session at some point? Or
I think we need to do
or we do a
executives.
special meeting, or how would we do it? How would-
Next,
At the next meeting.
meeting, we
At the
do
next
executive
meeting.
session?
Yeah, I think we'll do an executive session at the next meeting, and I'll be able to report back to you who submitted
Yeah,
And it's
what
up
their
to the
rates
council.
are. I have no information right now.
Yeah,
right,
we have to wait till the
absolutely,
council
okay.
Deals with that and the.
And when is that January meeting?
committee right
Our
now.
our
Is it the
meeting's
8th?
January 8th.
January 8th, okay.
Wait. I have
Oh,
it.
yeah, here it is, yep, yep,
January
yep.
8th.
Yeah.
January 8th.
Yeah,
Be the
got it.
mayor's representative. And who else is on the committee? No, I'm not. I'm not on the committee. I don't believe so.
No.
Who's
I'll
on
just
the
tell you, I
personnel
mean,
committee?
it's no secret. I got a call last Thursday from Paul Burr, the township
Right,
attorney,
mayor's representative.
who said that the council was moving forward to kind of figure out what it is that they're going to do, and that he would call me today before the meeting, because I discussed with him that the board wanted to know whether or not it was going to be represented, and whether or not it was me who was going to represent the board, and he said that he would call me back, but I have not heard from Mr. Burr. We are. I got served, I think I told you, I had a process server come and serve me in my reception area. I'm not reaching that question yet. I haven't been authorized to represent the board, so,
Right.
you know, if you
So
want to
that's
get technical about it, no, I couldn't accept service.
Not at this point.
But
So,
yeah, honestly, I don't.
Why can't we
Right.
appoint our own attorney?
I think you should be able to.
Yeah,
I mean,
why is
Arthur
the
has
council?
been part of this process from day one.
It doesn't make any sense to have somebody else.
The problem
So-
is, and it's a minor problem,
Yeah.
but the question that I think the council is kind of playing with is, who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for the representation?
Well, isn't well, this is, you had a very limited role in what the council did, so.
This board had a very limited role.
So,
Yeah.
Right. I mean, as I've I make no bones about it. I'm going to tell you on the record.
File and
The
dismiss.
claim against this board is so tissue thin.
It should be dismissed.
There is
It should
a
be-
barnyard
yeah.
epithet to
You
describe
filed to
naturally.
dismiss it.
Against the board.
Something about
It should be
an
very
ant
simple
bull.
and straightforward on your part.
You know that thing was on the tracks the other day?
So, another question, though. Art, did you talk about the indemnification, or you didn't?
I did.
Ah,
And
and we're not.
Got the same answer, or lack of answer.
sorry,
Oh, that was real?
I was just fading away there for a minute.
Yeah.
Demonstrated.
That's where that conversation went.
It didn't go anywhere, or is it still open?
It's still open.
It's still open, all right.
I don't know. Mr.
Whatever you
Burns-
consider a lack of a response to be, I will consider that it's still open until we get a hard no. You know, because we need a hard no.
Well, you know, and I explained to him this board's position on that, and I told him that Counselor Terry was bringing back to the council the position of the board, and I just was reiterating that.
How'd that work out for
You
you?
know, he doesn't really have, and no respect to Mr. Barr, he doesn't have the ability to make decisions. It's the council. that
Can we
decides.
draft something, vote on it, send it to the council? I mean, who can do this job if we're not indemnified, right?
Don't you think you're responding to the lawsuit filed against you? It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Right, but
We're about to get
the
Jason
thing I want to
back.
just
We're on the
say,
record and our mics aren't on.
the thing I
Uh-huh.
just want to say is that we, the board, are embedded in the lawsuit and therefore a bigger picture. And it would make, while we all agree that a motion to dismiss should be made with respect to the board, there has to be coordination among all the players. And so,
I mean, we had, when Dennis Galvin was, well, we've had other.
the first lack of one,
Yeah, but
right.
we've had other litigation.
Mhm.
It's never really been an issue. Either you or the conflict attorney
I'm-
represents the board.
I'm a foot soldier. I do what I'm told to do.
And if the board tells you.
And that's what Mr. Burr is doing, too.
Yeah.
But the point that Arthur was making is that the claim against the planning board is weak and should be dismissed when somebody makes a motion for it. We are not the primary defendant in the case.
Right.
And so, you know, we need to let the primary defendants do their thing.
Figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But
So-
if, just saying, if the primary defendant needs the support of this board before we move to dismiss, that's something that needs to be coordinated.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm very supportive of the idea of the council hiring the most competent counsel they can find, which would be you, but there's only so much we
right
can
now,
do.
the board hasn't been served, so we don't have a clock ticking yet.
And
I
that's
haven't-
true, because I'm
I
not
haven't received
authorized to
anything.
accept service.
But has the board been served if you received the complaint?
No.
No, the
What
service
he
isn't,
did-
I mean,
Because I
and
haven't received
He walked
anything
in-
on behalf of the
He
board.
wanted me to sign an acknowledgement that I received the service, and I refused to do that.
Okay.
Good.
Well, those 3 years of law school paid off. Paid off big time.
Nice.
Yeah, never
All right,
signed.
well,
So that's the update, folks. I
okay.
expect, I think, is there a council meeting this week coming up?
Keith, now's a really good time to pay his
Tomorrow.
bill.
There were no bills this week, so we're sorry.
No
Weren't there
bills.
bills we held over from the last meeting?
Yes.
There
We're
was
waiting
just
for
two?
info, though.
We're still waiting?
waiting.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything, so.
You know what, I'll follow up. I
I will respectfully
you
move
asked,
adjourned.
I think that they sent
Well, I just wanna-
emails, but I obviously
Second.
didn't put them in
Well,
the
just
packet.
quick, I just,
Okay.
Okay, but I'll double check with
We have
that.
a motion.
We'll get a handle
just
January
quick,
8th.
Keith and Ms. Willis, I think we should meet again early January to go over the master plan
Okay.
subcommittee issues. I'll get some on the books. You in, Janice?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's
All right.
definitely
I love the enthusiasm.
I have, by the way, I do have a report from the Housing Commission on their recommendations for a new housing element. I didn't want to send it to you tonight. I was going to send it to you for the next meeting in January. So I'll first send it to the master plan subcommittee
Okay.
with the intent that it'll be distributed to the full board. And I want to get the similar reports from the Historic Preservation Commission and the
Yeah.
Environmental Commission. I don't think you guys are there yet,
No, the Environmental Commission has been spending the year creating the Climate Action Plan, which
Okay.
hopefully will go to the council after our January meeting.
Okay.
Is
And then
the
you can
likely schedule, and then we can get back on the reexamination.
Okay.
So
All right.
Keith, is the tree subcommittee also known as the tree huggers?
No, it's not in the bylaws. It's strange. Or then it's also not called the tree group.
We can vote on that if you want.
You know, they're about trees, and they are working on revising the ordinance.
I think that's great.
I do too.
That's great.
All right, guys, we had a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Everybody have a great holiday.
Happy
And a
holidays,
great,
Happy holidays to
relax.
everybody.